If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
People, have you ever been followed, chased, or hunted by a paranormal being, demon, evil entity, or shadow being? If so, share your most terrifying story or experience.
I think I have a demon following me. I remember when I was younger I had this imaginary friend named Trees. So whenever someone inquired about my imaginary friend, I would respond, he is not imaginary, he is simply a ghost. Yeah, so hearing that from a 6-year-old definitely will make you sleep with one eye open for a while. Anyway, my mom tells me stories about how I used to talk to nothing but air and I would come running in her room screaming because somebody was grabbing my feet. Now that I'm older, I look back and say how ducking scary that would be. I think I can connect with the dead because whenever I go to a new place and feel eerie, I get like a little shiver through my body, and something weird happens after. I'm honestly super scared because yesterday I was in my room watching the 100 and I saw an almost invisible shadow move from the corner of my eye. So I got up and looked around to see what the hell it was, and I couldn't find anything. However, there are instances when my television is turned off, and the reflection is so clear that it resembles a mirror. Occasionally I can see slight movement through my TV screen, and it scares the shit out of me. For some reason, it seems Trees is still here with me. I'm being followed, and I need help. When I was 5, my grandparents and I were on a drive to go out to eat one night, and we passed by this 3-story apartment complex that faced the highway. You could see into every room that was illuminated. Imagine standing on the patio of the 2nd floor, put yourself about 3/4 up football stadium stands, peering down at the bench, and seeing a buddy's car you recognize going down the highway. You stare at the car, hoping your friend notices you and waves or does something similar. This black lady, as I called her, stood just as I said and made eye contact with me from the time I noticed her to the time we got too far away to see the apartments. From that point forward, she's followed me ever since. To give you a visual. Remember the widow from Insidious? And the blood countess from Stay Alive? Okay. Take the widow, make her face a little darker, sunken eyes, but when she talks, her jaw dislocates like the screams from the blood countess when Ben set her on fire at the end. Though it doesn't flap with the words, it just hangs open and sends chills with her soft, horrifying voice/whispers. I saw her every day at least twice up until I was 16. She'd watch me sleep from the corner of my room. She would show herself midday in the most convenient times, you know, when no one is around to witness. She'd haunt my dreams. She'd scare the shit out of me at school. She was everywhere I was. The funny thing is, I've even moved around a lot with my dad, sometimes states away, and she'd follow. She started making herself known again here recently, after my grandma died a little over a month ago. I just don't know what to do. I know that my 2 grandmothers and uncle are around me because they have made their presence clear. I can see, hear, and feel them nearby. So has the black lady. The room isn't cold when she's here. There are no oddities or abnormalities with the environment or within. I only sense her when she passes through me, and the smell reminds me of what a mass grave that has never been covered would smell like. She's not textbook. This is different. And I don't know what to do. Something is following a friend. Reaching out for a bit of advice. My friend told me a while back that something had been following her most of her life. A shadowy thing. She would tell me stories, and honestly, I dismissed them. I assumed it was sleep paralysis. It was definitely spooky, but since she always seemed to see it while in bed, it made sense to me. Her boyfriend mentioned that he had seen something before as well, but since he was also in bed at the time, I still felt that there was nothing to discredit my sleep paralysis theory. We've been friends a few years now, and despite us often jumping between my place and her place on weekends and just in general spending a lot of time together, I never noticed anything off. Last night, I finally saw their thing. We had a pizza and movies night, and I decided to stay on her couch. I didn't have work in the morning and wasn't really feeling a 30-minute drive home. She went off to her room, and I settled in for the night. I woke up hearing her cat hissing at something. I figured she would handle it, but as the sound continued, I got worried and went back to her room to check on them. She was asleep, and the cat was staring into the bathroom, slightly calmer with my presence but still very much so on edge. I looked into the bathroom, a bigger bathroom with a large attached walk-in closet, and I saw what had the cat on edge. There's something. Like a shadow, but not. It's hard to describe. It was darker, light was coming in from the streetlights outside, but I couldn't see perfectly. The shadow hunched in the corner by the tub, and at first, I thought my eyes were just playing tricks on me. I picked up the cat and turned to leave, but as I did, I looked back. The thing moved. It slowly started to rise up, and I just reached out and slammed the door shut. She woke up and asked what was going on. I explained, and she just said, "Oh, you saw it too." I didn't leave her room. I was worried if I did something, it would happen to her. So, I 100% believe her now. I want to help, but I'm not really sure how. I thought maybe I could sage the apartment and say a few prayers, but I don't believe that will work. It's attached to her, not the place. What, if anything, can I do to help her out? Any advice would be appreciated. I am being watched or followed by something. The only way to describe it is that if I don't have my back against or toward a wall, I feel like a shadow is towering over me. I wouldn't say it is a guardian, more like a stalker. This thing has grown fond of me? I'm not sure how to describe it. There are close to no scratches. I am not a religious person. My father is a Christian, and my mother is Buddhist. Sometimes I visit my dad and my mom separately, they divorced. My dad lives in a rural area in Vermont, so we are surrounded by trees and some neighbors. Anyways, I feel as if this creature, this demon, trusts me. Or tries to protect me. I know it sounds awfully Wattpad-ish. Believe me, I will do anything to get rid of this thing. Occasionally, I might hear some words or phrases in Latin. Usually late at night when I'm studying or playing video games. I've only assumed this thing might be a male, but the voice is female. This paranormal activity suddenly grows when I arrive at my dad's house. I feel not bothered by this behavior at this point in time. But a strange thing is that I need some noise to sleep. Like talking or something like that. So, I usually play a video in the background when I sleep. YouTube is my main platform for noise, by the way. Anyways, I fall asleep and then wake up a couple hours later, maybe 2 a.m. It sounded like running. Something is running through the trees and bushes. Around the property. Pretty strange, right? Well, my dumbass wanted to check what the noise was. Now this is when it gets weird. I have 20/20 vision and no mental health problems. I look outside and faintly see a tall, slim humanoid figure. Not looking at me, but in a diagonal direction. I then hear whimpering close to my door. Others may know that my dog had been put down, so there is no possibility of a pet. I do not want to check out the noise. My heart was beating fast enough. Who knows what I would have found. When I get back to my computer I see something typed into the YouTube search bar. I swear that this next part is 100% true. The search bar reads, Experiator qui quam mali tempori et nunc. Now that sounds like a ducking Harry Potter spell. By now I only assumed it was Latin, so I translated it. The result was that you are safe now. Well, I was always safe. This was a chilling experience, and I cannot stop thinking about it. If anybody has any advice, can you please identify what this is? I'm desperate. I just got a boyfriend, and I don't want him to think I'm some sort of freak. I don't want him to get involved. Please, just any advice. I'm worried something is following me. Over the summer I was at a friend's house. We were just talking about old time stuff, and I made a vulgar joke. Seconds later, a doll from the top shelf hit me in the head, but I was at least 4 feet away. It had to be thrown, but it was just the two of us. Neither of us was close enough. She also saw this happen, so I have a witness. It was weird, but what can you do? I brush it off and try to move on. So a few months later, I keep having someone do a friendly knock on my door. Now I have a small apartment, and there are wooden steps that are very loud when someone is coming up, so the knocking caught me off guard. I check, and nothing. Weird but not supernatural. So we skip to last Saturday. The knocking happens again. But I'm close enough to check right away. Nothing and no one is there. Later that night, while I was in the bathroom, I heard a sound as if someone were trying to force their way into my house. However, as soon as I was able to check, the noise stopped. Once again, there is no one and nothing in sight, but my locks are half turned, as if someone had almost succeeded in getting in. I figured it was neighbor kids until last night. This prank is so dumb, but I'm a little freaked out. I salted a hot dog with this sea salt. Now this salt has to be ground to get it out. So today I get up and grab my salt, which wasn't where I left it, and it's empty. It was, I'd say, 80% full last night. So I checked to see if I broke it. No cracks. I couldn't have spilled it because, like I said, it needed to be ground to get out of the shaker. If I had spilled it, there would be a pile of salt somewhere. There's no moisture in the shaker, so it wasn't evaporated. Like what happened to my salt. I have always believed that salt can drive away supernatural entities. What's happening? Has anyone else ever had this happen to them? This is the first time I bought salt like this as well, so it's not like I'm confusing it with an old shaker. I'm just weirded out. Thoughts, anyone? The girl who follows. So I've lived in Gloversville, New York, most of my life, and one of my most interesting encounters is that of this 5 to 6-year-old little girl that has followed me since I was about 16. I'm 27 now. The first encounter was when I lived with my mom in a cushy 3-bedroom house. I was in the middle of doing my homework, and I heard what sounded like giggling coming from my attic. At first I played it off as nothing till I heard it again. So being ever so curious, I investigated, only to find nothing out of the ordinary. The next encounter was a few weeks after that. I was sitting watching YouTube, and I felt a tug at my shirt. It scared the hell out of me, so I went downstairs to the living room, only to hear footsteps behind me. When I turned around, there was a small girl in a greenish dress holding what looked like a stuffed rabbit. She smiled at me and waved, and when I blinked, she was gone. I told my mother, but she didn't believe me as usual. Now I've seen, heard, and felt her around me for going on 11 years. The latest encounter happened after work yesterday. Upon arriving home, I encountered a cold air enveloping me, despite cranking my heat to 70 and closing all my windows. My cat starts watching something dart across the living room and chases it. As I watched him, I also saw a shadow dart across the living room. Needless to say, I'm ready to move out. A ghost followed us while we hiked near our campground. About 2 years ago, my fiancé and I went camping in a small state park in the Midwest. This park is known for having short, family-friendly hiking trails and a small creek that kids can play in. The campground is a 4 to 5 minute drive from that area, and there are no trails that directly connect that recreational area to the campground. There is one long trail that starts after the very last campsite, but it does not lead anywhere. You just turn around and walk back to the campground. On our last day, my fiancé and I decided to walk on that trail. By this time, all the other campsites were empty, and we had actually spent the previous night completely alone. The trip was during the fall, so the ground was covered in leaves and it was also windy. About a third of the way into the trail, we started to hear some rustling behind us, so we turned around and noticed that there was a woman walking behind us. Not a big deal, so we just glanced quickly and kept going. But then the rustling got louder. This woman was speed walking toward us, and she was now about 4 yards away from us. One thing stood out to me, though. She was not wearing what you'd typically wear on a hike. She was wearing a red buttoned-up cardigan, white skinny jeans, maybe pixie pants, a black belt, and her red hair was curled neatly. Like a 1940s hairstyle. She appeared to be in her mid-30s and had her makeup done. It's just so strange to me that this lady would be speed walking on a trail all on her own. Even if she had walked all the way from the recreational area, this isn't the type of park where people host birthday parties. People are normally wearing athleisure wear, not white jeans. People take their kids there to get wet and muddy near the creek. After about 3 more minutes of her storming behind us, the rustling stopped. I didn't want to keep looking back because I felt that was rude if this was actually just an innocent lady, but we eventually looked back, and she was gone. Even if she had turned around 5 minutes before we looked back, she should have still been within view. But there was nothing. We turned back around, and all of the campsites were still empty except ours. We walked to the parking lot right after our hike to get some things, and there were no other cars. I'm convinced we were being followed by a ghost entity following me. I'm going to share what I believe is a paranormal phenomenon that happened to me. If you don't believe in this kind of topic, please, I need some kindness since it's taking a toll on me. What I experienced is kind of prevalent in my culture. A few months ago, I had a tarot reading. And the reader mentioned, I sometimes sense that there is someone watching me while I sleep. I didn't let her continue what she was going to say because I already knew about this. But she advised me to always pray and believe in God. Just last week, I opened up to my sister about the reading, and I told her that I was aware of this shadow following me since I was like 14 to 15 years old. I'm in my late 20s. She got angry at me for not telling her about this because it will just make her more anxious now. I told her that I brushed this off since I don't want to acknowledge this entity following me. She said that I should acknowledge it so that it will go away. The next day, she told me that she remembered what our grandma said, that whenever something follows or latches onto you, you will not succeed in life. She continues that since I am living with her, she will also get affected by this. For example, there are unnecessary expenses and such. She said that our uncle had the same situation as mine before, and my grandma went for a quack doctor to help my uncle. About this entity, I remember before when I was around 13 to 15, I had a recurring dream that whilst I was sleeping, there was this man figure, but wearing all white, standing at the end of my bed. Sometimes he sits down and looks at me while I'm sleeping. When I was 14, I had a sudden huge bruise on my inner right thigh. Its form is a 4-finger hand that resembles a skeleton with its thinness. I didn't have any accidents or get hit prior to this. The bruise spread up above my knee, and its colors were like green, purple, and red mixed together, and it was warm when I touched it. It took over a month to heal. So I thought it was over. I have another bruise again on my inner left thigh, which also resembles a hand, and again took over a month to heal. My mother brought me to this quack doctor and said that there's an entity following me who likes me. A few years after that, my eldest sister brought me to another quack doctor for some unrelated illness and said that this entity follows me around. My mother also saw this entity following behind me, but she said it's a big dark shadow. 2 months ago, my BF also saw that there's a big shadow following me. And after this I had a very strange dream about this thing. I don't know if I should acknowledge the presence of this entity. Some people might judge me for it. It would be ironic discussing this when my only shield is my prayers and belief in God. If you have experienced this, please share some of it and what you did. Following ghost. I've had this same ghost following me no matter where I live since I was 13. I met this male ghost when we moved into our old house. One night I woke up to an old man above my bed poking me, saying, "See, she won't wake up," multiple times. Then I would hear my name being called out in the middle of the night whenever someone was sleeping, and my room smelled like cigar smoke all the time, and I never smoked. 2 years ago, I moved out, and I swear it followed me. I would hear footsteps walking up and down my stairs, experience cold spots, and see shadows. My husband and I just moved into a home, and it continues. I would hear someone saying hello or making a PSST sound. I would also see a shadow in the hallway or in our bedroom. My 2-year-old has also seen this shadow and screamed. My most recent experience occurred today while I was watching television with my toddler. I heard a loud bang, and a few seconds later, our pantry door opened, followed by the vacuum cleaner falling out. I am currently feeling quite unsettled, and I hope that the shadow will leave me in peace. We are followed because of me. So, hi. My family, my sister, her boyfriend, my mom, and my stepdad, has lived all together in an old house since 2009 in Canada. We never had any problems in this house, and we never had any paranormal problems in our separate lives. My sister has always seen people that we thought had nothing to do with ghosts since she has Tourette's syndrome and a tendency to have imaginary friends. For my part, I've always been different, and people would often tell me I wasn't a happy kid. I would be terrified of sleeping because I would always have bad and weird dreams. Growing up, I understood that I had always had lucid dreams, mostly every day. I began to have astral projections, sleep paralysis, and premonitory dreams. Anyways, you don't have to believe me about it, but I want to give you as many details that I can because I need some serious help. 4 or 5 years ago, people would tell my family that when they would come over, they would see people around the house. My sister would also tell my mom that she saw people around too. One day, I was in my kitchen, and my sister called me from the bathroom. I was really mad at her because I couldn't properly hear her because I was using the microwave. My sister came back in the kitchen and told me that she wasn't even talking to me. My mom decided after a few months of weird crap happening to call the pastor. Since then, they have exorcised my house 3 to 4 times. I developed a disease called psychogenic non-epileptic seizures, and I often have seizures relatively close to the paranormal episodes that are coming. 3 or 4 months ago, I had a dream. I was in a field with a man. I could see every detail of the man's skin, and so on. It was not a normal dream. I saw a tall black figure, and I told the man to back up. The black thing came really slowly, and at one point, I ate it. I woke up in tears, my body was dripping in sweat, and I even woke up my boyfriend, who was sleeping at my house, because it was so intense. I couldn't sleep anymore. It was really early, like 4 in the morning. I went to an esoteric shop because I was afraid and I felt different. The lady practically jumped on me as I was walking in the store with my mom. She wouldn't even let my mom speak for me because I was so scared and ashamed. She told me that I was the biggest canal she had ever seen and that something was after me. She gave me her personal information and told me to call her when I would be ready. I was always afraid, so I have never made a call back. Anyways, it has been a few weeks since we started having the worst time in our house. Doors open and close, we are always watching. We all wake up at 3 in the morning. My dogs are getting crazy. We see black figures everywhere, and we are not feeling safe. And we have no idea on what we should do because nothing is working. Please send us your advice. A shadow person has been following me throughout my life. I've had multiple paranormal experiences, but this one creeps me out the most. I've had a shadow person follow me throughout my life. The only time I remember seeing it myself was when I was in my old bedroom upstairs, meaning not in the basement. I was around 7 to 8 years old, and in the middle of the night I woke up and looked at my window, which had blinds and was illuminated by the moon. In front of the window, however, was a black silhouette of a little girl with what looked like short curly hair, almost old-timey looking. I was terrified and thought I was seeing things, so I just rolled over and tried to go back to sleep. The door was opened when I woke up. I asked my parents if they came into my room, and they said they didn't. Although I haven't seen it again, my friends have. A couple of months or so after I had seen it, I had a sleepover with my friend at the time, still in the same room. We had slept on the floor because my bed was too small for the both of us. In the middle of the night, my friend woke up and saw that there was a dark shadow man standing over me and just staring down at me sleeping. She told me this when we woke up in the morning and I noticed my door had been opened. I just figured it was one of my parents checking on us, so I asked both my parents if they came into the room, and they both said no. Years later I moved into my sister's room, downstairs in the basement, after she moved out. I was 16 to 17 and had forgotten about the shadow person at this point. My best friend spent the night, and she told me in the morning that she saw a shadow figure standing in the corner of the room in the middle of the night. At first I didn't believe her until I remembered the two incidents that happened almost a decade prior. I didn't tell either of my friends about the shadow person story until after they mentioned that they had seen it. I'm 19 now and haven't had any incidents, that I know of, since. A ghost follows me, and I never knew why. So just a little backstory. The house I currently live in has a strange feeling ever since I first stepped inside. You might hear some footsteps, breathing, etc. during the night. I was in my room one night on New Year's Eve. My door was closed. I knew someone was there on the other side. So, the ghost knocked on my door. I got up to answer it. No one was there. My parents were at a party in the next town over. I was left with my little hellspawn of a brother. He was downstairs screaming into his microphone on Fortnite. I was upstairs in my room, likely working on a new Skyrim animation, which I ultimately deleted because of a crash. I closed the door and went back to work. 3 minutes later, another knock. I knew it was that ghost again, so I didn't answer it. The knocks grew increasingly forceful until the ghost spoke. "I know you're in there." The ghost spoke in a whispering tone. I got up, grabbed a plastic battle axe, and opened the door. Then, I saw it. A shadowy figure standing in the living room. I walked into the living room. Axe still in hand. The axe was not going to work, so I grabbed a huge kitchen knife. I was typically dual-wielding weapons against a ghost. I played a lot of video games with swords, and I happen to know dual-wielding. The ghost walked towards me. I boogied it to my room and locked the door. It locks from the inside. The night was the most terrifying night ever. The ghost stood in my doorway, staring at me sleeping. I got out of bed and grabbed the same kitchen knife from under my bed and walked towards the ghost. I took 3 steps, and it disappeared. Many other nights were like this. I later learned that the older owners died in my house. The ghost had the same physical features as the husband. I hope you enjoyed this. Goodbye. I always have the feeling of being followed by something. Does anyone else experience this? Ever since I was a child, I have always felt a presence with me or watching me, something dark rather than positive. I always feel scared or uneasy. Anywhere I go, it follows me. At one point, I could sense both a female and a male presence simultaneously. I frequently move between different houses, my own, my partner's, and my mom's, and in every location, I experience a feeling of being watched or sensing a presence, which fills me with a sense of dread and compels me to leave quickly. I have had a few small encounters at all the places, and all the houses have no history of deaths. Here are a few of my encounters. First, while at my mother's house, I was changing my clothes and generally looking ahead when I heard a knocking sound coming from inside my closet. I even noticed the doors rattle out of the corner of my eye. Another encounter occurred at my place when I heard very loud footsteps in the hallway leading to my bedroom. The most recent incident occurred at my boyfriend's place while we were going to sleep. With all devices, phones and PC, turned off, we heard a loud female voice saying, "Hello?" in a confused tone. We were home alone and checked our phones to see if we accidentally dialed someone, but the last calls were made the day prior. If anyone has this feeling of being watched or being followed, I'd be happy to hear your experiences. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. The little girl who followed me for years. When I was 4 years old, my grandfather passed away. He was a clairvoyant, in Mexico City. My mom and I went to Mexico City to attend his funeral and stayed in a house that belonged to a friend of the family. The house was in the shape of an L with only one bedroom, dining room, kitchen, and bathroom. One day I was showering while I played with my toys. My favorite toy was a Mickey Mouse that was half the size of me, a 4-year-old at the time. When I finished showering, I wrapped myself up in a towel and headed to the room where my mom and I slept. My mom returned me to the bathroom because she disliked it when I left my toys soaking in the shower. I remember walking down the hall and pushing open the door to the bathroom. There in front of me was a girl who must have been around 6 to 7 years old. She was dead. Her skin was a bluish gray. She had dark circles around her eyes, and the off-white, puffy dress she was wearing was dirty as if she had been exposed to dirt. The little girl had black hair and was staring at me. She was also holding my Mickey Mouse toy. I remember feeling my stomach drop and every single hair on my body stand. I remember losing my breath and feeling my skin tingle, kind of like when your leg falls asleep, except that feeling is on all of your body. It's crazy because even when I was 4 years old, I knew that something was terribly wrong the instant I saw her. I managed to snap back from being in shock, yell, and sprint back to my mom. I don't remember what happened next, but she tells me I was crying like crazy, was pale, and was stuttering. She was also very scared. The little girl followed my family around for the next 16 years. Weird things would happen in the middle of the night. Sometimes my little sister's toys would randomly turn on around 2 a.m. This was when I was around 13 years old. My mom would hear a little girl's voice calling out for mommy during sleep paralysis. And even my best friend saw a little girl run into my room where I was one day, only to follow her and see me in the room alone. He asked where my sister was, and I told him that my parents had left with her in the morning. He turned pale because he had seen a little girl with black hair and a white dress run into my room. I eventually made up my mind and decided I was going to confront her next time I saw her. It wasn't even 1 week later when I saw her in my dreams. We were standing at the top of a hill facing each other. There was a beautiful autumn evening backdrop. I asked her why she kept on following us and scaring us. She replied with, "I just want my mommy." I told her that the lady she would call mommy was my mom and that her mom was not in my reality anymore. I told her to follow the path down the hill, which led into a beautiful sunset. I told her she would find her mommy there. She walked down the hill and followed the trail into the sunset. She turned around and waved bye to me, and that was the last time I saw her, and my family never experienced anything again. I saw something when I was 7 years old, and now it keeps following me everywhere. When I was 7 years old, I went to the forest with my parents. It wasn't night or even evening, so I guess it's even weirder. I told them that I'm tired, so they said I could stay in the car with my sister, she was 1 at the time, while they went to look for mushrooms really quickly. It was fall. I stayed, but my 7-year-old brain obviously couldn't stay calm, so I started moving around the car and looking out the windows. That's when I saw a tall, dark figure with a deer skull on its head. It looks like the modern-day interpretation of a Wendigo, but I definitely couldn't have seen it somewhere before, as I had no access to stuff like that. I immediately came back to my seat and sat there waiting for my parents, but now I see the creature walking behind me, hiding in shadows, hiding behind things like trees. It has never tried to hurt me, and I don't think it will. I told my GF about it, and she speculates it might be some kind of guardian. She's a witch, she knows her stuff. Do you think she's right? I think something is following me. So, when I was in elementary school, I lived in a nasty cheap apartment. We were on the 3rd floor, but I can't remember our suite number. When we moved in, the room I claimed as my own had holes in the doorframe. It almost looked like the room had been barred up, like someone was trying to keep someone inside. I could never get a full night's sleep in that room. Actually, no one could. Anyone who slept in that room, be it my parents, someone visiting, or even our pets, would get horrible nightmares. I don't recall the nightmares now, since I was only 6 or 7 then, but I remember they were so bad I only went in that room during the day and slept on the couch or in my parents' room. The final incident that prompted my distress occurred when my grandmother was babysitting and required me to sleep in the room alone. I remember laying in bed, too scared to sleep, and my eyes moved to the closet. There was what I can only describe as heavy black mist that moved similarly to dry ice vapor. I watched it for a bit before these eyes appeared. They were red and gold, kind of speckled together, and glowed without giving off any light. They looked almost too human, and when I screamed and called for my grandma, they were gone. I never slept in that room again. Now, let's fast forward a few years. Last year, when I was 22, I started feeling like something was watching me in the house I moved into with my spiritually stunted fiancé. Always at the end of the hallway, where the hall split off into the stairs to the upper suite, the bathroom, and the computer room. I'd only feel it at night, when I was alone. I was so certain something was there that I called my best friend, who works with spirits and demons and such due to family background in hoodoo/voodoo. I asked her to do a spirit walk and gave her my childhood comfort object, a plushie, so she'd be linked to me. What she described during her spirit walk was eerily similar to what I'd seen that night as a child, even though I'd never told her what it looked like. She said it looked like dry black ice vapor and had blue and gold eyes that seemed to glow but didn't give off any light. She told me she'd never seen something like it before on any of her spirit walks and that it didn't seem to be here on Earth, but maybe she was latching onto something so it could be seen during her walk. Needless to say, I was absolutely freaked out. I did a bunch of cleansing rituals she suggested, salted every entrance, window, and mirror, and even made a servitor to distract it. After performing these rituals, I stopped feeling that entity watching me, and although I have since moved to a new house, I remain absolutely terrified that whatever that thing is has been following me since my childhood. I assume I couldn't feel it in my old family house because my dad is a medium by bloodline and had protective things set up in the house. So what I'm really here to ask is, has anyone else seen something like this? Do you know what it could be? And if so, do you know how to get rid of it? Nothing I can find online or in books looks or sounds quite right, and I'm getting desperate. I just want it to leave me alone. Any and all suggestions are welcome. The thing that follows me. I've had something follow me my entire life. A pitch black humanoid figure, about 6 feet tall, wears neat clothes and has hair that I can see only in outline. And I'm not the only one to have seen it. The first time I saw the figure very clearly was when I was about 5 years old. It was walking towards me down the hall at my grandmother's house, and after I froze, I ran off, causing it to disappear. However, I am unsure whether the bad feeling was due to being a child or for some other reason. Then again when I was about 12. I was looking out my back window into the paddock behind my house. The figure was walking horizontally away from me, and then it turned and continued walking towards me. I stared for a second with that same scared feeling and then went to run off, but after a couple of steps I decided to stop and look back, and it was gone. Those are my two major experiences that I know weren't just me seeing things because I watched them clearly. I've also found that my mother has seen it standing behind me while I was on the couch, and it promptly disappeared. It turns out my mom's old friend saw the same thing happen, a black human-like figure behind me just disappear, on a separate occasion, and she didn't know about the possibility of there being something following me. So I'm not the only person to have seen the figure. It gives me a bad feeling, but that might be simply because I'm seeing something unusual. My mom reckons it's this ghost named Gary that we encountered when I was a newborn following me. He woke mom up in time for my appointment and told her his name, but he was good, and this doesn't feel like him. I've had other instances where I sense its presence because I experienced that same feeling of fear and an unusual awareness of my surroundings. As I've gotten older and moved, it seems to be less apparent, but I still have occasions where I think I might catch a glimpse or feel its presence. Anyone have any idea what it could be? I think I'm haunted or being followed by something. For reference, I lived in a haunted house at a young age and believe I picked up a poltergeist spirit of sorts while I was there. After moving, I started having isolated experiences with a specific shadow figure, and I know it was the same one because it had the exact same energy and feel. Since then I've seen it in person and in my dreams, and I know for a fact it's tried to communicate with me before. Ever since I started acknowledging its presence more, these incidents have ramped up. And the Ouija board in my room started giving me issues, literally falling off surfaces without any kind of touch or movement, literally falling into my lap type of thing. I know it wants to communicate with me, but I'm not sure what to do about it. There's something following me. Essentially there's something following me. It's kinda easier if I explain from a few years ago. Since I was young, there's been a shadow in the corner of my room. Now this shadow is black and tall. When I say black, though, I mean black. There's a street light outside my window that lights up my room, and this corner stays black. I suppose sometimes it can have a humanoid shape to it, but most of the time it's just tall and black. This shadow has never really bothered me. It's a bit ominous, I suppose, but not truly scary. But my family hates it. They hate my room because they hate the corner, where the shadow is. They always say they have a bad feeling from it. When my 3-year-old nephew visits, he consistently expresses his fear due to the monster. We always ask, what monster? Where is it? He always says my room is in the corner. Now he's never heard of my corner shadow, so it was strange he mentioned it. Currently, the shadow in the corner is not my concern, or at least I don't believe it is. I doubt that's what's following me. It's something else. Everywhere I go that I stay overnight, it's there. My boyfriends, my sisters, my aunties, and all the houses where I have stayed while dog sitting are all affected by this. It is there. The only way I can describe him is as a man. He's tall, over 6'5". I never see the body of the figure, but I always see its face, which resembles that of an older man, around 60 years old. It is wearing a woman's wig, specifically an old, short, and perm style. I believe it is definitely a man, but he is wearing women's clothing. It always leans over my bed and gets close to my face. It always smiles, not a nice smile. A smile like it's trying to scare me. The first time I saw this thing was around 10 years ago in my room at my mother's house. It loomed over my bed, bent down, and smiled. The reason I mentioned the shadow in my room earlier was that when the man first came, the shadow wasn't there. The shadow has been there for as long as I know but was gone that night. It came back the night after, and whenever I'm at my mom's, the man never comes. I feel like the shadow is protecting me even though my family says there's something wrong about my corner. The shadow never follows me, though, but the man does. My worry is I've just bought a new house. I'm moving out of my room at my mom's, and I just know the man is going to follow me. I don't want it to. I'm safe at my mom's with my corner shadow. I don't think the shadow can follow me. Is the man the shadow? Is that why my family says there's something off with the corner of my room? Or is the man different from the shadow? Does anyone know what this man could be and why it follows me? How do I stop it from following me into my new home? Something is following me around my dorm? My college dorm is pretty old. I'm not super surprised by this happening, but it's still creepy as f. Whenever I do my laundry, I have to walk down some stairs from my hall to the hall below, where the washers are located. Exiting the laundry room, you walk past the big open doorway where the elevators are at. Multiple times now I've been walking back to my room when I see a girl run past the big doorway and then, like clockwork, poke her head around the corner of the stairwell below once I'm at the top. It is always the same girl, but she disappears so quickly that I can never get a good look at her. The creepiest part is that there are no footsteps or anything. Another frequent occurrence is that doors in the hallway open by themselves. This has happened to multiple people, myself included, and it's always a locked door. They've had the locks checked and replaced and all that, but it continues to happen. It's not even the paranormal implications of this that scare me, it's that I could wake up in the middle of the night to some random drunk guy in my room because some ghost girl decided to let herself in. Aside from those happenings, there are normal things, like cold spots, knocking, disembodied voices, seeing someone out of the corner of your eye, and all that. Maybe most of it can just be blamed on the fact that the building is old, but there are a couple of things, like that stairwell, that I'm not so sure. I would like to look more into the building's history. I've heard that at one point it was used as some sort of housing facility for people displaced due to a natural disaster that happened in the area around the early 20s. Without doxing myself too much, I'm referring to the Appalachian floods in 1916. I'm not sure if that's true, but I'll see what I can find. I think something followed me out of my cousin's basement. This story happened a long time ago, but I still remember it like it was last week. So does my cousin. Our families were very close growing up. We were there often and usually would watch movies. We were young, and this was around the time killer clowns were going around, so when we would watch movies, they would usually be horror, The Conjuring, Ouija, Annabelle, etc. I was about 12 at the time, my cousin was 14, her brother 12, and my brother 8. We were in their basement one evening while our parents and older siblings went out for the night. We had no babysitters. Our instructions were to lock the doors, stay together, and not answer the phone. My cousin's basement had a TV in the corner of the room, and on the same wall was a projector. My cousin, 12 meters, and my brother were watching the hockey game on the TV and playing Call of Duty on the projector, while my other cousin, 14F, and I sat shoulder to shoulder on the couch, which was backed against the wall, wearing our headphones and watching videos on our phones. I had an iPod Touch at the time. Our brothers decided they were hungry and turned on the lights as they went upstairs to find something to eat. My cousin and I sat for about 5 minutes before her brother's bedroom door in the basement slowly closed. When the door came to a full close, the lights in the room turned off along with the projector and TV. I paused the video I was watching on YouTube and first assumed it was a power outage, as I didn't believe in ghosts, but when I checked my battery, I saw my iPod was still charging. Before I could do anything, I heard the sound of my brother and cousin laughing, almost giggling, behind me as if they were right next to my ear, but the laughter sounded different. It didn't resemble their usual voices. It creeped me out, and my head shot up and towards my cousin, who was already looking at me with her eyes wide. Neither of us missed a second to get up and run upstairs. The first thing we did when we got up there was look at each other, and then I said, "You heard it too?" She agreed and explained what she had heard, which was exactly the same as what I had heard. We walked towards the kitchen and saw her brother. We explained to him what had happened, however, he didn't believe us and insisted that my brother had been in the third-floor bathroom since they left, claiming they didn't talk or laugh. This creeped me and my cousin out even more, and when he went downstairs, everything was turned back on, and the bedroom door was open. We discussed that night every few years, and it continues to unsettle us to this day. I might be haunted, but I do have a lot of ghost stories that started happening after that night. Kids I babysit telling me or seeing things around me or similar things from that night happening to me in my basement with or without other people there. When I share my experiences with others, they often report having their own unusual occurrences afterwards and return with stories to share with me. Usually the ones who joked about what happened or did not believe it had the encounters. I think something followed me out of her basement, but I don't believe he is evil, if that is possible. Slightly unsettling. The Ouija board spirit may still be following me. About 6 years ago, when I was about 18 years old, I was at a party with a few friends when we pulled out a Ouija board. At the time I was a little drunk and thought nothing of it. After a while, only one girl and I were the ones who still wanted to do it. We spoke to a spirit who revealed that its name was Bridget, female, and that it died in a car accident back in 1985 in the next town over from where we were. We asked what kind of car, what street, what date, who else was in the car, etc. I was getting a little freaked out at this point. We then said goodbye and blew out the candle. Just for the hell of it, I did a little digging the next couple of days through town records to see if the story was true. It all matched. Everything. The date, car model, location of accident, who else was in the car, everything that she told us was real. When I saw the girl a couple of days later, she asked those questions of me. I told her. Pulled the pictures up on my phone and told her every detail matched precisely what the spirit told us. She turned a ghostly pale white and actually began to cry. It may not seem like much to most, but this was my first experience with the paranormal in my life at that point, and it really stuck with me. Ever since this day, things have gone missing. I feel taps occasionally, and I could have sworn once that I heard a car when there wasn't one there. I consulted someone I know who regularly practices Santeria. She told me that it is in fact still following me. It's unsettling, to say the least, to know. Sometimes I think I hear or see things, but I just keep trying to convince myself they're nothing. Do you have any advice on how to send the spirit away or ward it off? Yesterday my friends and I saw a demon, and I think it's following us. Yesterday at our high school there was an art showcase, so we all went to see our band friends perform live. It was me, 15 female, and my boyfriend, 15 male. My friend, whom we'll refer to as A, 15 female, was with our other friend, whom we'll refer to as G, 15 female. While the band was practicing, we were in this area behind the school with a ton of tables. My boyfriend has a panic attack due to my friend pulling out a taser. She didn't use it or anything, he just had one for PTSD reasons. After that, once he had calmed down, A and G left to go somewhere, and I went to get some water. When I came back, my BF said he saw something that looked like it had long hair, almost like Jesus. He said he looked down where he saw it peeking its head, and he saw it further down turning a corner, so he followed it while keeping his distance. It turns out it was a dead end, and there was nothing there. After that, we both looked at a window right in front of us, and there was a face in it. A and G came back, and we told them what happened, and they saw the face too. G ran up to it, screaming at it, and it vanished really quickly, so my boyfriend and I took off. I don't know where A went, but I guess G stayed there to taunt the figure. After that, she started coughing up blood. A little while later, while she was slamming on the windows started slamming closed, and the figure with the long hair was darting back and forth, and the lights were flickering. G ran away from there, and we were all at home. All of us felt like we were being watched, too. When I woke up today, I asked everyone if they were okay. We all feel exhausted, and our whole bodies hurt. We weren't up late either, only around 11. We all had dreams that someone close to us died, and they looked extremely realistic. All of us had a dream like that, aside from my BF, the one who initially saw it. He dreamed that he was back at the location where the long-haired figure was standing and looking at him. Then the face in the window showed up saying it was going to get him. The first demon thing looked like Jesus with a blurred face, and the other looked almost like a nun. I don't think that's a coincidence. We all feel like we're being watched, and we're all extremely on edge and look kind of sick. If anyone has any advice, please help. I don't know whether it followed us or not, but I'm scared. We also got a pic of it. We got staff to check the room today, and it's an office. The person that uses that office has been out for over a month due to surgery, and no one's been in the room, including janitors. No staff can get into the room aside from APs and counselors and people like that. My BF and a counselor went to look in there, and there was nothing at the window. No one can come into the room either, it's just really creepy. My friend mocked a homeless man in a graveyard once, she encountered a demon afterward. I live in a small town, and things such as small rumors tend to spread around quickly here since folks that have settled in this area are quite the nosy beings. The most trusted source of these rumors is the local bar located in the center of the small settlement we live in, which my father visits frequently. It is right by the school I go to. Anyway, 2 weeks before all of this bullcrap started, he came back with quite the story. It is said that something off has been going on with our town's graveyard, which is right by these creepy old woods a little bit away from the town. It usually takes 20 minutes to get there by car. Apparently, drunkards there claim that there is a medium disguised as a homeless man hanging around the woods surrounding the graveyard and that he can sometimes even be found by the graves eating bread. At first I did not believe it, so my friend and I decided to walk to the graveyard and hang around there trying to find that homeless man. So we did, and for a few hours, the graveyard was filled with ordinary people. A few more hours passed, and soon there was no one left except an old bearded man on the bench by the football field across the woods and the parking lot. He was looking at empty plastic bags with a box of cigarettes resting beside him, nothing suspicious. My friend had the guts to walk up to him and insult him. I walked away from her, but when she crossed the line, I pulled her back, warning her that he might be a serial killer or a crazy drug addict. However, he remained quiet until she yanked her hand away from mine, grabbed his box of cigarettes, and crushed it under her feet. She also threatened to hurt him if he did not speak, and that's when he stood up and looked her dead in the eyes, and he was much taller than her, too. He told her something along the lines of, "You are a disgrace in the eyes of God," and walked away onto the road until we lost track of him. I started to worry and told her that he might be a priest or a monk who would tell everyone in our town about how she had mocked him, and I was genuinely afraid. She reassured me that he was none of those things because he had cigarettes with him, but I think those weren't even his. That night, I slept over at her house because I was scared to go back to mine alone. I woke up in the middle of the night, and since I was sleeping in the same bed with her, I had a clear view of the pitch black shadow of a man standing over her, right beside the side of her bed, his palm on her wrist. I raised my body to stand up, but he turned his head to me and started to shake it from left to right, so I figured it was a lucid dream and rolled over to the other side, drifting back to sleep. The next morning, she looked pale and ghostly, and I asked her if she got enough sleep. She informed me she did not even sleep and kept having problems with her breathing and heartbeat. I was so scared that I almost pissed myself right there and then, and as of now, I am home alone and feel like I am being watched. Can anyone explain this encounter? The demon that follows me. There was a time when I was 10, I walked up to my mother and told her that I felt more connected to Satan than I did to God. Now I don't remember saying this at all because even at 10 I knew that Satan was / is the bad guy, I knew not to mess with him. My mother believed that my feelings were influenced by the paranormal movies I had been watching, so she told me I wasn't allowed to watch those kinds of movies anymore, which made me visibly upset. When I turned 14, I went to my mate's house. She wanted to watch a paranormal movie that had finally come out on DVD. When she put it on, I didn't look at the case before she played it. The movie was The Conjuring. I had heard lots of stuff about it, that it was the most scary movie out there at the time, so I was a bit scared to watch it. As the movie was playing, we stopped it because I 100% thought I heard someone upstairs. I thought it was just her brother, so I brushed it off. Halfway through the movie I looked at her. "Your brother is very noisy." She looked at me with a scared look. She told me that we were the only ones home. We paused the movie and thought we should investigate. Yes, I know that's how people get killed in movies, but I was 14, so, shh. We started walking up the stairs, and it sounded like there was someone running in her dad's study room. She was too scared to open it, so I did. As I opened the door, I saw a black figure running past it, like in Paranormal 3. I ran down the stairs and out the door. This was the first time my demon had ever showed itself to me in any way. When I saw it, I felt a big dark feeling that if I didn't get out of the house, I was going to be hurt. I messaged my mom to come and pick me up. She didn't ask any questions. She just came and took me home. When I went to bed that night, I couldn't stop thinking about what happened. I looked over at my door, and when I tell you I felt happy, I really felt happy. I saw my little brother pass, and when I saw my pop, he had big beautiful white wings with a gorgeous white glaze around him. In that moment, I knew that pop was my guardian angel in heaven. I felt that my demon was also there, but he was standing guard so it couldn't get in. It felt like he had put a portable shield just around my room. All of my stress and worries were gone for the night, and I got the best sleep I had ever gotten in so long. I woke up, and I thought he had left completely. I got scared that my demon was coming to get me now, but as soon as I felt scared and unsafe, he wrapped his wings around me to let me know he was there. This was in 2014, and it is now 2021 on the 12th of May at 1:12 a.m., and I sometimes still feel him when I have gotten myself into shit with a bad spirit or demon, which tends to happen a lot, not on my own accord. Let me know if you would like to know more because there is lots more where this came from. I hope everyone is having a good night/day/afternoon. Wishing you all the love and respect you deserve. It followed me down the stairs tonight. My wife and I purchased an 1890s Queen and Victorian several years ago, and we are slowly restoring it as a traditional B&B as a part of our retirement plan in another 10 to 15 years. My wife found one written account of a ghostly encounter following our initial, individual, and personal experiences. Which is not generally what you want to find when you're trying to explain away an experience. There's every reason to believe that the original owners passed away in the house, and subsequent to that, it's my understanding that someone died in the house, and the body was dumped in a water well that is now covered by a mid-century addition to the original structure. Think Social Security fraud, the FBI ultimately dug up the body from the well. My own experiences have been fairly limited and mostly what the hell oriented. My first awareness was the sound of someone/something walking toward me, which I attributed to our large dog possibly following me upstairs. But she was downstairs and behind a closed door when I later checked. My wife describes similar experiences with the main area of focus being at the top stair landing. She has a practice of singing or humming a tune as she comes down the stairs, and she believes that this either interrupts the experience or at least distracts her from the experience. I normally follow this musical practice, too, whistling a tune we sometimes sing to our dogs or singing an old jingle. I was home alone this evening and needed to go upstairs to my study, lair, to grab something. It was a long day, and I had a few pressing things on my mind, so instead of singing or whistling, I was thinking about a work conversation from earlier. As I was coming down the stairs, I heard steps following me down. A different tempo and rhythm than my cadence. I slowed and thought about turning to look, but quickly noped out. I only briefly looked up as I made the 180 turn at the bottom of the stairs and headed toward the kitchen. I did not see anything. But I could feel something near me. I didn't feel like I was clear of the presence until I passed into the new section of the house. The hair on the back of my neck and arms has still not settled down an hour later. I had to briefly return to the front of the house to check for mail, and now the unsettling feeling I usually experience only at the top of the stairs is present just on the other side of the kitchen door. I think it followed me down the stairs, and I decided to stay. It doesn't feel right/safe to speak about it inside the house, and so I refuse to talk about it there. Texting my wife about it, or sharing it here, feels safe. If we had talked about this before tonight, I would have said I believe there is something there, but it's not bad. Now I'm not so sure. This seems ridiculous. I know that tomorrow, in daylight, I will probably feel less anxious about it. Probably. Need serious advice. Possible ghost following me. Please help. Background: I moved out of a haunted in-law unit last August. Light switches kept flipping up and down by themselves while I was home on many occasions. My bathroom door closed itself, and when I went inside, I saw the toilet paper draped up and around my shelf. Another night, I opened my closet door and started dialing into my safe above when half my wardrobe flies backwards right in front of me. Another time, I walk inside my bathroom, and at the very moment I step foot inside, the light turns off and on 3 times with long pauses in between. I just got that instant feeling like something was trying to get my attention and was frozen in fear. It got so bad that one day I just started yelling for it to leave me alone. The place was built 120 years ago with its own dedicated breaker box located inside. I ended up moving out and found myself a much newer/nicer in-law unit to live in. Before moving out, I lived here for 1 year, but the haunted stuff didn't really start happening until 11 months in, oddly enough. I was close to renewing my lease, thank God I didn't. Fast forward today, I moved out to my new place 5 months ago. For the first few months, I felt creeped out whenever I heard a noise or opened a closet, as I honestly feel like I have developed paranormal PTSD from all the experiences at my last place. In the past month, I have started to feel as though something is watching me while I sleep, and this sensation has occurred every night since. Then the other night, I went to bake cookies. I put the trays in the oven, closed the oven door, and set the timer for 12 minutes. I then walk over to my computer, located in the same room. About 5 minutes later, the oven door opens and slams itself shut so hard. It was very loud. I instantly turn my head, walk over, and see that the 2 trays of cookies inside are now at angles due to the force. I'm positive I closed it, but I play around with the oven door for a bit to see if I can replicate what just happened anyway. Maybe it wasn't closed all the way? Maybe the tray was wedged between the doors? Nothing. That oven is newer, and the oven door is heavy and stays shut with good force. It takes a good amount of energy to open it enough to have it slam shut like that, which really creeps me out. Honestly, I'm not sure what to do at this point. Growing up with divorced parents, I've lived in 14 different homes and had paranormal experiences at a few of those homes too. So did my mom and siblings, though, so I know it's not just me. Typically I know that spirits tend to stay at the property they dwell at, but I'm worried that this last one may have followed me. I've read that can happen if they get attached to you, and this last one really messed with me a lot. It didn't even matter what time of day it was, things would happen all the time. Although I don't have any special paranormal abilities, I am sensitive to them and am very tuned in / aware of the paranormal. I did not sage this new place when I moved in because I've heard that can cause more damage than good. I also did not sprinkle salt around the perimeter like I should have. I'm not sure what to do at this point. Should I sage, or is it too late? I haven't been sleeping much lately, staying up until past 3 a.m. because I'm just freaked out now and can't sleep. Did this thing follow me? Is this a different spirit? It's pretty hard for me to justify / dismiss this oven door event a few nights ago, but time will tell if I experience more things that are indisputably paranormal. I want nothing more than to feel comfortable at my new place, and any help is appreciated. It's such an awful feeling when I'm spooked out all the time and can't sleep because of it. It's putting a damper on my professional / personal life. Thanks in advance. Something invisible followed me home, and my pets knew. The college I attended was near a lake park and across the street from a large psychiatric hospital for the western side of the state. The lake park itself was the site of the former mental hospital and still contained ruins and a graveyard, as early as 1910, from those hospital grounds, which also included a farm run by the patients then. This also had a sordid history. Western State Hospital was the hospital where the 1940s actress Frances Farmer was controversially committed by her family and underwent tortures and abuse. The lake and the surrounding nature were lovely, featuring a nice running trail around the lake and bike trails throughout, and it has now become a popular park. One afternoon after class I decided to go for a run around the lake. I didn't have headphones that day and was just in my thoughts, which became really strange. Although no one was actually around, I had the unsettling feeling of being checked out and followed. I had all kinds of daydreams about what the place must have looked like in the 1930s and 40s. I saw images of very dirty and underweight men in rags carrying rocks and building a wall next to the trail I was running, which was all vines and overgrown brush. Some had shoes and some boots, but some didn't and had newspapers wrapped around their feet. Some had obvious Down syndrome, but others didn't. I saw them carrying water up from the lake and horses and wagons traveling up the road to the hospital. It was very strange. I heard and smelled things. It became really profound daydreams. All went normally with the run, however, I got in my car and drove to the grocery, then home to my apartment, which is also nearby the college. I lived in a very small apartment alone, but I had a small dog, Japanese chin, and a cat. I vacuum every morning to prevent hair everywhere. The apartment floor was freshly vacuumed and still had the lines in it from that morning, especially in the corners of the living room. As I was unpacking groceries and preparing dinner, both of my pets sat in the kitchen watching me. When I glanced down, I see the cat staring toward the dark living room. She got up and turned completely toward the far corner of the living room and stood up, puffed up and growling. At this time my little dog looked at her instead of my food and then toward the living room and exploded into a panicked barking frenzy. I stood there frozen and staring at nothing in the dim living room while my tiny animals fiercely defended me, with the 8-pound dog barking and the cat growling and facing off with the empty corner. I flipped on the lights and slowly got closer as well. The dog did a strange forward and backward dash as if she were trying to smell the corner but were afraid, and she even dashed backward and snapped her teeth once at something I couldn't see, like something had touched her. The sliding door was near the corner, so I flipped on the porch light and tore open the curtains. Nothing. I opened the glass door and felt a strange whoosh go past me out the door, and my dog ran to the door barking like crazy but wouldn't go out. I shut the door, and both animals now focused from the corner on the door, staring out and growling more softly now. I looked over at the corner, and in the plush, freshly vacuumed carpet were 2 large work boot impressions and one more stepping toward the door. It was as if someone with much bigger feet than mine had been standing there just a moment ago. They were still there the next morning when my mom came over, and she saw them clearly as well. I went to the park many times for many years after that and always had in my mind before I left, "Goodbye, friends, it's been fun, but don't follow me home. See you next time." That seemed to help. It never happened again. A few years later, the city did a restoration project on the park and uncovered an actual stone wall on the trail down from the old hospital to the lake. They put up historical info plaques, and it turns out the stone wall was built by the patients in the 1940s as a work therapy project. They had carried all the large stones to the wall from various places all over the huge grounds. It had been neglected over time and forgotten under vines and vegetation. Look exactly like my daydream that day. Something has been following me, but I'm not sure. I believe I have had a benign presence following me since I was a child, but I am not researched or experienced enough to really know. It started when I was 4. Before this, when I was 2, my mom's, grandma's, and my house burned down, but I was not there, so I think this presence is unrelated to that event. We lived in a temporary home for just under a year until we found and moved into a new house. At the new house I had my first experience. I woke up in the middle of the night and saw our cat in my room. I watched it walk out of my room and followed it into the kitchen, where it circled our kitchen island and then went downstairs to our basement. I opened the door and saw my cat's eyes at the bottom of the stairs looking up at me. I eventually realized there was another set of eyes, approximately adult human height. I did not follow my cat downstairs and instead just went back to bed. Fast forward to 2021, 17 years, and I was 21 years/0. Throughout my entire life, I had experiences in every home, having lived in 4 different houses. Mom married a wonderful man. 90% of the time it was just whispers or shadows, sometimes even just a strong presence, but it was frequent, once a week minimum. There were also larger events, doors slamming, dimmer lights being messed with, loud running footsteps upstairs when I was home alone, and one occasion of being awoken by a scream that persisted for 5 to 10 seconds after I woke. These events were more rare, once every 6 to 8 months, if I had to guess. Again, this has been happening everywhere I've lived since I was 4-ish. One night I was telling my mom and my grandma about this. My family doesn't talk about the supernatural really ever, especially my stepdad's side, but my grandma has always mentioned offhand things that were spiritual, and my mom is just really into hearing stories like this. I didn't tell anyone because I was afraid of being accused of making it up, but this night we had a little wine, and I decided to tell them about everything that happened. I explained that the strange occurrences began after we moved out of the house that burned down, specifically the incident involving the cat and the man downstairs. My grandma seemed particularly disturbed about this part of the story. According to her, the cat died in the house fire as no one was home to bring her out when the fire started. In late 2021 I moved about 90 minutes from home for college. I went to college late compared to others, so I didn't live in a dorm. I had a pretty nice and new apartment. After a couple days of being there, sure enough, the sounds and whispers and other small occurrences began. I want to clarify that I never felt threatened by these small occurrences, and the only reason the big ones bothered me was because my initial reaction to most of them was home invasion. Otherwise, I never felt like there was an evil presence. One night, knocking in the walls kept me awake. I had my first college exam the following day, and I was feeling stressed and frustrated. In my frustration, I exclaimed, "Cut it, Philip." And the knocking stopped. I don't understand why I called it Philip, it is just what I said. After that, I had no large occurrences, and the small ones dwindled to once or twice a month instead of every week. In late 2022, I moved into a college house with 3 roommates. They were college friends who had heard about my ghost and were eager to see it. I had some personal experiences in the first couple months I lived there, but no one else noticed anything. I haven't had any experience with Philip since around Christmas of 2022, even when I visit home. Now seems like a good time to say that I grew up with 4 brothers and 2 parents, but none of them ever mentioned anything like this. One time a door slammed when I had friends over in high school, but that was the only time ever that more than just I experienced something from Philip. I guess my question is, what is Philip? Where did he go? I'm not sure if this is just one entity or if it's even an entity, but it seems too constant to not be. I got chased by someone. Hi, I'm 19, female, and am sharing for the first time. I have been into paranormal stuff for many years, and recently, I thought about sharing my experience. I have experienced normal paranormal sounds and shadows very often, but this experience was one of the scariest I have ever had. For some context, I was visiting my grandparents in my village, and I was maybe around 13. Our house was a 2-story, but the steps were outside instead of inside, and we had rented out the rooms on the ground floor. Our bathroom and kitchen were outside our actual house, the bathroom being behind the kitchen on the far left side. Just think of a typical village house in Asia. At 3 a.m., I was watching TV, as I usually have a hard time falling asleep. I was watching Kitchen Nightmares, lol. I had the urgent need to pee, and everyone else was asleep, so I decided to go alone. I took my phone and quietly made my way outside. Once I neared my bathroom, I saw a man-shaped shadow on my far right, but it was dark, and my grandmother had a huge garden, so I just thought it was a plant. After peeing, when I came out, I saw the shadow had disappeared. So again, my rational brain thought I was just tired and sleepy. Once the garden was out of my vision and I crossed the kitchen, I heard loud footsteps almost right behind me getting faster and faster. My fight response came in, and without even looking back, I ran up the stairs to my home. Once I reached the balcony, I looked back to see a dark shadow with his slippers in his hand slapping the kitchen wall. I heard my family waking up and coming outside to see what the commotion was. I was ushered inside while my grandpa shouted at the figure to leave. I found out later that they thought it was the infamous drunken neighbor. I tried to fall asleep that night but couldn't, and hours later, I heard my grandmother waking up and looking out the window. She went to sleep shortly after that. There was complete silence for an unknown duration until I heard footsteps outside. It was circling my entire house, and it stopped after 2 circles. I have no memory of falling asleep that night. The next morning, my family and I were all in the kitchen, and they convinced me that it was the drunken neighbor who usually goes around at night, apparently. My grandmother said that she saw him standing outside when she looked through the window last night. She said she could see only his lower half, which is weird, but was pretty sure that it was him. That evening, our neighbor came around, and while my grandmother was complaining about the drunkard, our neighbor appeared confused. She said that's not possible, as he had passed away 2 days before the incident due to alcohol. Even years later, I still get chills just thinking about this. What if I had not run and gotten caught? I have told many people this story over the years, but I still don't have anyone who could give me any insight about why or what it was. If anyone could tell me similar experiences or people with psychic powers could tell me what it was, I would be glad to finally solve the mystery. My family was followed by a demon for 10 years until we moved across the country. Let me start by saying this was over 10 to 12 years ago. I'm in my 20s now. This happened to our family beginning in the house I was brought home from the hospital to, multiple other homes throughout the state, and it finally stopped when we moved over 1,000 miles away. My family always believed in the paranormal, as growing up in Louisiana all of us had encounters throughout our time there. However, the most sinister encounters began in the home where I was born. My parents often discussed this house, where they had the most experiences, as we were too young to remember some things. My older brother stored his toys, including a red and yellow push car, in my room, and I would often observe it moving on its own down the hallway before coming to a stop. When our nanny was present, the oven would inexplicably heat up, and she would hear banging on the front door despite there being no one there. My mom felt creeped out alone at night and saw a green light in her bedroom vent. This was honestly just the beginning of it all, as we moved to another home in the same city not even a year or 2 later. In the second house, we experienced issues with the second floor smelling like rotten flesh and eggs in certain areas, while other areas had a temperature difference of 20 degrees compared to spots just a few feet down the hall. This residence is where I began to recall memories, as we lived in this house for a few years. The first memories I have of paranormal encounters are of being in my room, asleep, and waking up not knowing the time, but always feeling someone at the end of my bed and seeing a black figure sitting there. It never scared me, and I was more curious than anything. The peculiar aspect is that I distinctly recall having only white bunk beds in the room, whereas my mother insists that I had a small toddler bed along with other furnishings instead. After we moved out, we found out that a teenager ended himself in what used to be the garage but was turned into a tool shed. The owners tore down the garage but kept the concrete slab from it. The next house we moved to a few years later was where I experienced the darkest entities, and to this day I'm terrified to talk about it. I was 5 to 6 and lived on the second floor with all but one of my siblings. My sister and I shared a room, but she only spent 1 weekend a month with us. It started with my older brother and me seeing black figures. He saw them outside his window at eye level with him, again, on the second floor, and I began to see them sitting on our swing set. Now, to clarify, our swing set had our names engraved at the top of each swing, so when I saw these black figures, they were always sitting under my name on my swing and would be looking at me. I would also see them at the edge of our property next to the laneway. These figures were almost see-through but had red eyes, and I still remember it. But the one event that will always have my mom and me convinced it was a demonic entity was that one night my mom was reading in her bed on the first floor, and my room was directly above hers. It was in the middle of the night, and she heard me screaming at the top of my lungs for her. She ran upstairs and saw me standing in the middle of my bed, screaming and crying and pointing to the floor, and I remember looking at her and saying clear as day, "They're here to get me, Mom. They're all over the floor, they're all around me." She grabbed me from the bed and took me to her room, and for the rest of the night, she heard scratching, banging, and footsteps from my room, despite no one being up there. Things eventually calmed down when we moved to another part of the state. We still had activity but none as bad as the last house. My parents got help for the addictions they had, which we think the demon or whatever dark entity has latched onto. We eventually moved to the west, and nothing has happened to us since. My older brother and I are the only two of us kids who remember this, and we both still have our hair on our arms stand up and our eyes water when we talk about the dark entities. I never will go back to that house again. Demon followed my dad. He was tall, all black, and wore a top hat. Every time he visited, I had terrible nightmares when I could go to sleep. The first time I saw him, my dad came to visit me from California for a week, and every night the shadow would watch me. First he was in my chair. I ran out of my room and asked my dad to sleep in the room with me. He did. The next nights would just be in the corner. Next year I went out to California to see him. The same figure appeared in my grandparents' house in the corner of my room. I had a horrible nightmare about being in a tight hallway, tormented by a little girl in all white screaming. I ran out of the room and begged them to not let me be alone. The next time my dad was back in Idaho, at night he was watching me from my chair. On everything, he took off his hat, and there were big demon horns on his head. I don't remember much about this one except he showed me his horns, and I never saw him again. This probably happened between 7 and 9, it's been 10 years, so I don't remember everything, but I remember the feeling of being completely petrified by the same entity. A mimic ghost has been following me for 4 years. I'm a 20-year/0 female who has seen a lot of paranormal stuff throughout my life, but I currently have one spirit that follows me. I really don't know how to start this story off, but I'll start with where I think this spirit has followed me from. I live in Australia, and while I have visited many areas with excessive spiritual energy or even curses, one place where I lived for a while on the other side of Melbourne did not seem to have much spiritual energy. My stepsister and I were out walking when everything kind of got heavy and tense, which made us start walking faster before running into the gate of our home at the time. I'd learned this thing where if you tell a spirit you don't give them permission to enter an area, it'll keep them away, so I did that. I could always feel it standing at the gate, though, watching the house at night. About a year had passed at that point, and I had moved in with my grandparents to do a course, but I would visit my mom when I had the chance. She had moved to a new house a few doors down from the old one, and there was one night when I stayed over for a family event or possibly my birthday. I don't really remember, but I decided to go to bed to watch some videos. Since the house was newly bought, there weren't any curtains, so my room faced directly to the front of the property, and I started hearing my stepsister yelling my name from the front of the property for some reason even though they were all near the pool in the backyard. I ignored it for a while, but after hearing her shout my name for the 4th time, I went to the back where they were all and asked if anyone was calling my name. My stepsister was sitting with them all. No one had called me. It had been about a year since that incident occurred, and nothing else had happened since then. I used to work at a very haunted pub, where I had seen a lot of strange things, but one night, as I walked out to take the trash to the bins, I started hearing my coworker shout my name again. It was quite dark, except for the lights from the pub windows, and I looked around for her. I could hear her singing at the same time as she was shouting my name. Everything felt really tense again, so I ran back inside and asked where my friend was. She'd been in the cool room the whole time, so I asked her if she was shouting my name. She said no, but she was singing, which completely spooked me. The most recent thing was a few days ago when I heard my stepmom talking at the door. I thought she'd come home after a biker thing she went to, so I went to the door. No one was there. This thing has been following me, and despite only doing this every year for a few months, I'm getting concerned. I know this thing isn't friendly. As I write this, I hear something dragging outside near my window and tapping against the wall. I've moved about 4 times to opposite ends of my state, and it has continued to follow me. I don't know if this is a stupid thing to ask, but I'd really love help in a way of trying to get rid of it. Sage doesn't do anything, and telling it to leave me alone doesn't help either, which makes me feel even more helpless in this situation. I have my protection hanging above my bed, but I'm honestly scared. It followed us? Growing up with my dad has also taught me to be really respectful of others and their cultures. My dad is a retired Marine, so ever since he joined the DEP when he was 16 up until he retired at age 40, he's been raised like a Marine. He served and was stationed in numerous locations worldwide, including Nicaragua, Okinawa, Iraq, and Afghanistan, and he has always retained fragments of those experiences. My dad, of course, never forgets that. He raised us to be mindful of others, to respect and honor culture, but to not treat anyone unfairly just because they're different. I wouldn't say my dad is a superstitious person, he likes to be cautious and prepared, but I wouldn't say it crosses the line of superstition. He always told us ghost stories and stories of war that had been exaggerated and built upon for entertainment value, but there was one story he never changed. He never told it to make it sound fun or extra spooky, he just told us the story he heard exactly at face value. It was the story of one of his friends in the Marines. He was native, and he told my father about an encounter he had with a certain creature from native folklore. Anyone who is relatively versed in native folklore should know exactly what I'm talking about, but please forgive that I don't want to say the name. He always told the story as a warning and to let us know that even though the culture we were being raised in might not believe it, there were cultures that did believe it and that the place we live in is home to those cultures. Knowing this, my siblings and I always do our best to be as respectful as we can. I live in the Midwest. The Ohio River Valley. In my state, we have plenty of nature and state parks, fitted with lakes, campgrounds, hiking trails, docks, the whole 9 yards and then some. This area is home to many native tribes, such as the Miami, the Erie, the Shawnee, the Iroquois people, and many others. Because of this, you'll find many people who are aware and respectful of Native Americans and their cultures. Don't get me wrong, there are plenty of redneck, hillbilly, gunslinging Americans who don't give a damn who you are or where you're from, but I've noticed a lot of people in my area tend to be respectful. On to the story. My dad and I like to do PT together, we especially love going to hiking trails. That's what we decided to do today. We drove out to a nearby state park and went on one of the trails there. It started out by a parking lot, goes down by the creek, and is a pretty steep climb, hike back out. Along the way you see all kinds of beautiful rock formations, fresh water runoff, trees, and flowers. It had just rained a few days back, so it was pretty muddy, but we were going a pretty good speed. Now it's good to note that my dad always carries just for emergencies gear, a folding utility knife and a flashlight on him when we go on the trails. He usually just leaves it in his pockets, but as we finally came to the low point of the trail by the creek, he pulled the knife out of his pocket. I didn't see anything, and he didn't even look like he had seen something, so I decided not to ask, but I could immediately tell that something was off. I was very mindful as we walked the trails to the other end before the climb. I got this dull fear that sat in the pit of my gut the whole time. I could almost be sure someone was watching me, but I refused to turn around out of fear that I would confirm my suspicion. A few yards from the point my dad pulled out his knife, I began seeing shadows out of the corner of my eye. They were shadows that shouldn't have been where they were. My shadow was in front of me, and my dad's shadow was in front of him, so I tried to convince myself it was just shadows from the plants. But I know the trails of that state park better than the back of my hand. I know them by heart, and those shadows were not supposed to be there. I shook it off and kept moving. About 5 minutes later, I heard voices. Real quiet, hushed and whispery, just the sound of them chilled me to my core. I couldn't pick up all of what was being said, but I heard a few phrases like go, come to me, and look, and I heard a few sharp shushes that no natural plant life, wind, or animal could ever make. The nearest campsite was about a 3-mile walk through dense vegetation from us, and the parking lot was way back at the start of the trail, so far we couldn't even hear the cars from the nearby highway, let alone the cars at the parking lot. I know my dad had to have heard it, because he started walking faster the second the voices started. He started jogging, and I did with him. We finally made it to the climb back up, and he put his hand on my shoulder. He told me to just climb up the side, use the rocks and branches to help me from slipping in the mud, and not turn or look around. He said I would lose balance and fall if I did. I thought it was a load of horse shit. The climb was steep, but it wasn't that bad. I never had to lift my leg up higher than mid-shin to take my next step. From there we climbed out and made it back to the mouth of the trail. The sound of rustling in the trees kept us moving fast and was never far behind while we climbed out. My dad had his knife unfolded, and we more or less sprinted to his car. Usually after our hikes, we will hang out for a bit in the parking lot, stretching and drinking water, drying off with hand rags, changing into dry shirts and hoodies, and checking for ticks. We usually just decompress for a while before our 20-minute drive home. But today, as we approached his car, he folded his knife, tucked it back into his pocket, and told me to just get in and buckle up, so I did. My eyes were glued to the road in front of us the whole drive out of the park. Once we were out and back on the back road highway, we both eased up. We pulled over at an empty gas station where we did what we usually do. Checked each other for ticks, towel dried our sweat, joked about how caked in mud we were, changed clothes, and everything. We went in and bought some water and snacks and got back in the car for the ride home. During the ride we were mostly joking and talking like we usually do, but as we made our way back into our town, he looked at me and said very seriously, "It followed us down that trail. I didn't want to scare you. I'm sorry. I just nodded, and that was the end of it. We've been to that state park countless times, even on that specific trail, and something like this has never happened before. I don't think my dad has plans to ever go back to that trail at the state park. Safe to say, we didn't tell my mom. There's something following me, and I don't think it's good. What should I do? So, for a bit of context, growing up, I've always seen, heard, and even felt two specific spirits, shall we call them? Both I have managed to communicate with through simple yes or no questions and knocking. From there, I found out that one is male and one is female. The male spirit, I named him Daniel, and he seems to accept it, is quite protective in many ways, often visiting people who have caused me harm and even extending to tapping me or attempting to push/pull me out of the way of things. It's scary each time, but I've grown used to it. The female, who I've named Sophie, is more of a gentle soul and seems relatively docile, mostly following me around and occasionally making herself visible to me when I'm feeling especially alone. Now, there's something that has happened that is extremely different from the usual. While I was standing in the kitchen, I suddenly felt an intense pressure on me, like I was being suffocated, and I very clearly heard a female voice say, "Natalie." Whatever this is, I have never felt like this before, and for the first time in a long time, I do not feel safe. Daniel had been appearing much more often recently and following me in a similar fashion to Sophie, but I didn't think much of it. I think there's another spirit here, and it is not like Daniel or Sophie. This one feels darker and much more dangerous. Any thoughts? Spirit following me. I'm an RN. I work at a nursing home in the next town over on third shift. I've worked here for 3 months now and really love the job. Strange things have started happening to me lately, and I've never experienced anything like this. Over the past 5 years as a nurse, I have encountered numerous deaths without experiencing any emotional impact. I don't mean this to be heartless, it is just part of my job, and I have to keep it moving. Well, to give a little backstory, the nursing home used to be a hospital, which was built around the 1920s. When it was a hospital, the basement was the morgue. Since changing to a nursing home, in the 1970s, the basement is now used as a laundry and kitchen. The other night, we did not have enough linen, so I and a coworker went down to the basement to get towels, sheets, etc. Ever since then, the weird things have been happening, but I'm not so sure it's connected to going down in the old morgue or not. I recently had a resident pass away, and I absolutely adored them. They were so precious in every way possible. Their death was expected. I went to her room around 4 a.m. to check on her, and she seemed peaceful. I gave her a kiss on her forehead and told her I loved her. The next time I went in, she had passed. Incident number 1. I was standing at the med cart around 3 a.m. the same night as going down to get laundry and felt something touch my left hip/upper butt. I immediately looked back, and nothing was there, so I just brushed it off as being paranoid. Incident number 2. This was 2 days after incident 1. My husband was at home, and a picture randomly fell off the wall, late afternoon time. I've lived in the same house for 4.5 years now, and I hung the picture up when I first moved into the house. The only time I've ever taken it down was to wash the walls. This has not been done recently. I've never not once had an issue with this picture falling off the wall, especially when nothing was around to cause it to fall. Incident number 3. This happens 2 days after incident number 2. I worked third but was off this night. I was sitting in my living room around 5 a.m., playing on my iPad, when I heard a noise that sounds like someone typing on a keyboard. All TVs, appliances, etc. were off, and the house was quiet. I looked up and saw the Roku TV remote on the counter rocking back and forth, side to side. Both of my dogs and cat were asleep on the couch right beside me and had been for some time. Nothing was around to cause the remote to move like this. Incident number 4 happens 3 days after the incident 3. I walked into the resident's room that had recently passed away. There's a new resident occupying this room now, and I got the biggest whiff of fresh florals. It smelled like you walked into the funeral home that was filled with flowers. I asked the CNA who was in the room with me if she smelled the same thing, and she agreed. There were no flowers in sight. Incident number 5 happens the day after incident 4. I walk into a resident's room to give 5 a.m. meds. She is on the side of the room closest to the window. There is a curtain separating bed A and B. I went to the other side of the curtain to administer meds, and it felt like I had bumped into something hard with my left hip. When I was done giving meds, I went to walk out of the room and realized there's nothing on the other side of the curtain that I could have bumped into. I'm scared honestly. Any suggestions? I think I'm haunted? Okay, so I'm currently 17 years old, and I'll be 18 in September. I've been having this issue for pretty much my entire life. I swear this is a true story, and I'll tell it to the best of my ability and provide as much information as possible. Alright, so, when I was little, I always saw things. I'd see horsemen riding from the ground to the ceiling or vice versa, and I'd have dreams of paranormal things happening. For instance, ghosts or demons would chase me until they inevitably caught me and nearly ended me. I would wake up drenched in sweat. I thought I just had an overactive imagination. As I got older, I had this imaginary friend who would literally speak to me, tell me to do things, and follow me around or lead me to different places. I occasionally see him. I've been checked for mental illnesses and only have depression and anxiety, so it's not due to my mental illness. I only called him Sir because he didn't allow me to come up with a name for him, and if I called him anything besides Sir, or occasionally Master when he'd ask, he'd have bad things happen to my family. I knew it was odd to have this thing only I could see, so I'd only talk to him when I was alone. At one point, I was writing down the names of things I wanted to call him in my head. So I'd at least have a friendlier name than just Sir. And I shit you not. He walks into my bedroom, and my notepad flies across the room, and my pencil snaps. He really hated me using any other name for him. I used to be super religious, Christian, and would often pray for God to help me get rid of him, and sometimes he would disappear for maybe 2 weeks at a time before he came back. Getting older now, I believe that I have a demon attachment that needs more than just praying. I don't pray as much as I used to, so he started coming back. But any time recently that I've ignored him, he has made things happen. Bad things. Like the other day, my cousin was driving us to go get something to eat pretty late since she works long hours. And I turned back because I like to make sure people aren't tailgating us and possibly getting close enough to cause a crash. And there he is. I couldn't explain what his face looked like. It wasn't certain. It almost reminds me of Slender Man. He just has, places where those things would be. He has features like eye sockets, a hole for a mouth, and 2 slits for his nose. He wore a suit most days, or he'd just have a blurry figure. Well, back to the story. He was in the back seat of my cousin's car, literally moved her gym bag to one side. I don't know how she and I didn't notice a 20-pound bag move, and sat behind her. I turned away rapidly, and my cousin asked me what was wrong. I replied saying it was nothing. And boom. It happened. We were feet from crashing into someone who had pulled out in front of us, making a left turn. I'd almost had a heart attack, but my cousin has really good reflexes. Many people simply say, oh well, no one could cause that to happen, the other party just wasn't paying attention. No. That's not correct. Because when I turned around again he was ducking gone. I'm literally terrified for my life because he went from just throwing things, moving objects around, or pushing me to now literally trying to get me hurt or ended. I literally don't know what to do. My cousin sometimes stays at our place or takes the marijuana to her smoking spots. But I don't think it helps. I am genuinely scared because this issue has been present since I was 6 years old or younger. I'm not schizophrenic. My parents have gotten me mental health evaluations many times in the past, costing thousands. I've seen therapists and tried meds. Nothing helped. I'm literally haunted by something, and I think it's a demon. I really don't know what to do. Now, the demon is following me to my boyfriend's place and everywhere I go with him. My boyfriend is planning to seek custody of his son soon, and I am concerned about this situation affecting my potential stepson. I really need help. I am unsure about what actions to take. Please give me advice or tell me what to do. I am shaking as I write this because I know he is likely watching me from somewhere nearby. Please. I know you might not think it's true, but I'm literally on the verge of tears writing this. I'm so scared. I just want it to be over. This demon is always following me. I am having a repetitive nightmare of a demon chasing me everywhere I go. Not only in dreams, but I can also feel his presence every time I am about to fall asleep. I would have a typical dream with friends or at school, and he would always be running towards me behind my friends or from afar, like in the background of my point of view. Whenever the atmosphere of my dream becomes weird, I can feel like he is coming for me, and I always try to wake myself up before he grabs me. I am worried, and it is really disturbing. I am just wondering if someone here is experiencing something similar. Also, when I say that the environment becomes weird, everything freezes. Whoever I am speaking to, friends, random people, in my dreams stop speaking, and they also stop moving, and it gets randomly really, really dark, and then everything shakes. That's when he appears and starts running towards me. It's hard to explain. The entity is always black with smoke coming out of his body. Whenever he gets close, everything shakes, and his body also shakes rapidly from left to right. I had something follow me from one house to another about 15 years ago. About 15 years ago I lived in a house with my girlfriend. Over the course of about 5 years, We had numerous strange things happen. In our basement there were 2 steel poles used to support the ground floor of the house. The first incident probably occurred around 10 p.m. We were in bed watching TV when we heard what sounded like a hammer hitting those poles. She was scared and thought someone was in the house. I had to go down to the basement alone to check but found nothing, and the basement door was locked. The second event was we were in the living room watching TV when we heard a very loud bang from inside the closet next to the front door. I checked and again found nothing out of place and no evidence of anything. The third and final thing was once again in the living room. We had just become one parent a few months earlier and had a few different rocker-type beds for the baby. The one in the living room was a small one that the baby kind of lay upright in and had a base that you could rock up and down. While we were sitting in the living room, the thing started rocking on its own. This went on for about 30 seconds. We both saw it at the same time but said nothing. When I started to say something to her, it just stopped. After that we decided it was time to move. We moved into town from out in the country to a small 2-bedroom house. About a week after we settled down, we started to notice a few things. Nothing major at first but just weird. The smaller bedroom next to the bathroom seemed a little off to us as well. Our 2 cats would never go in there but would sit on the threshold, staring in. This is the house where I was physically touched by something I couldn't see but I could definitely feel. We had a very small bathroom. When you entered the door, the sink was on your right and the tub on your left, and just past that was the toilet. The walkway was just big enough for one person to walk through. I stood against the sink, facing the mirror, brushing my teeth when someone pushed me against it. At first I thought it was my young daughter pushing by me, but when I looked, I realized the door was shut and I was alone. I told my GF about it, and she said this house didn't feel like the last house energy-wise, but I disagreed. The one other major thing happened when I was home alone because my GF and daughter were out of town. I was sitting in the living room at the computer desk playing games with my headphones on. It was late, probably after midnight. While I was playing, I felt 2 hands rest on my shoulders, and I felt a weight push down on me. That one freaked me out a lot more because I was alone, and this wasn't just a bump, it was real physical contact. I left that night and crashed at my cousin's house. We lived there for about 1 more year, but nothing made contact with me physically again, though I always felt like something was there. Sorry for the long-winded post, but I just found this community and have never shared any of this with anyone except my brother and GF. The house I bought about 6 years ago has not experienced any unusual occurrences, which is a relief. We both even mentioned when we moved in that it felt clean of bad energy and vibes. I may never know what that was that made contact with me, but staying longer would have made it worse. What I do know is that I felt like something beyond this plane of existence was interfering with me. I think I'm being followed by a ghost, my paranormal experiences from 1997 to 2014. I remember the date of my first encounter with the paranormal because it was the date Princess Diana died. She really has nothing to do with all this at all, but it's just a starting point. The morning after, while watching coverage of the Diana crash on my old TV, I decided to turn off the box and start my day. While reaching for the dial, remember when you could turn TVs off by turning the volume knob all the way down? I felt an electric pulse shoot up my right arm. With my arm never letting go or turning the dial, the TV shut off. Freaked out, I remember immediately turning the dial just to hear that click noise to make sure I didn't just imagine it. The TV had in fact turned off on its own, and I did feel a shot of electricity shoot up my arm. This is usually the hardest thing to explain to people. You see, at this point I was living with my grandparent in a house built in the 40s in South Mississippi. A house, they've claimed to have seen a woman wandering the halls at night after being awoken from a deep sleep. The same house had cabinet doors that opened randomly, porch lights that turned on for no reason, and front doors that were chain locked from the inside while no one was home. I never experienced seeing the woman, but I felt her presence like the time I remember returning from a camping trip to see a message left on the answering machine only to play that message and hear the inaudible voice of a little girl. Whatever she said, we couldn't understand, except for the final sentence. I can't wait to see you now. Thinking of this still gives me chills. Let's fast forward a few years now to 2003, now in high school, and living in a newly built house by my father on the Mississippi Gulf Coast. We moved into the house in 1999, and my brothers and I would experience minor occurrences here or there that oftentimes we would attribute to the house's settling, even if the noises sounded like footsteps. One afternoon, the 3 of us were doing homework in the kitchen while my sister was in her bedroom, also studying. Out of the homework-induced silence, all 3 of us hear a voice say in a female tone, "Sarah," which is the name of my sister. The voice came from the opposite end of the house, away from my sister's room. We all look up at each other and agree that what we just heard was creepy. Immediately jumping up to check on our sister, we find she was in her room with headphones on, totally confused at what we were trying to explain to her. In the same house, I would experience a few phenomena, like my CD players, video game systems, and DVD players would all open after I left the room for a moment, as if somebody went in and hit eject on everything. I woke up one morning with random objects turned upside down, like my alarm clock, my cordless phone, and speakers. I recall falling asleep with my window open on a pleasant autumn night and waking up around 3:30 a.m. to the sound of someone exclaiming, "Jesus, it's cold in here." There was nobody else in the room. Years later, after the bank took back the house and my stepmother died, I would talk to my brothers and sisters only to find they all experienced their own unique things in the house, personal to them. A few years after moving away, I married and began a family. Together my wife and I never experienced anything I would consider paranormal at all until after our first child was born. We were living in Columbus, Georgia, when our 1-year-old began having extreme night terrors. I thought these things happened to all kids. My wife and I would also experience a few bouts of sleep paralysis. She experienced more than I did. My wife moves a lot for her job, and I can't remember anything else happening at that location, but a year later when we were brought to Daphne, Alabama, things started picking up again after the birth of our second daughter. I remember the moment it happened in Daphne vividly. We were sitting down watching TV, and my 1-month-old was crying because she had just woken up from a nap. Just as I was about to get up and get her a framed art print that had been hanging on the wall since we moved and mysteriously dropped from the wall in the kitchen. The picture would never hang on that wall the same way again after that. Another time I was home alone and smelled the freshest scent of flowers for about 10 seconds. It was so lush and vivid. I thought that somebody had to have come home with a bouquet. Needless to say, I was alone. My wife would constantly wake throughout the night and have me investigate the house because she heard something. One night we awoke to my newborn daughter crying, and a toy that needed to be squeezed to operate was playing music and flashing under her crib. Another time my wife awoke to find her high heels in perfect placement in the middle of the hall facing the door. These happenings were indeed sporadic and not all at once. My wife's work is now forcing us to move again to Birmingham, Alabama. It was a welcome change of pace indeed, and since the move 9 months ago, we haven't experienced anything out of the ordinary until last night. My wife woke me, saying she heard footsteps or music. She wanted me to check on the kids, now 3 and 1 years old. I told her I didn't hear anything, but just after I said that, we heard something crash to the floor in the kitchen. I immediately jumped up and found my 1-year-old awake in her crib staring toward the kitchen. There was a plastic cup that had somehow fallen off the top of the cabinet and to the floor below. In a sleeping haze, I put my daughter back to sleep and returned to bed, explaining to my wife what the noise was. She reminded me that she heard music too, and we drifted off to sleep. This morning I awoke to find our balcony door slightly ajar. I'm freaked out. I always try to find the scientific evidence behind everything, but I've just had too many things happen to think scientifically right now. I was followed around by a demon for a year. True story. When I was in 8th grade, I had just gotten home from school, and my family was out of the house, so I was home alone. I was working on homework when I heard one of my 2-year-old brother's baby toys go off. I knew based on the sound that it was a toy that only made noise when you moved this thing manually. I thought maybe my brother was home with my mom, so I went to look, and someone was there. I searched the whole house, and no one was home but me. I just pushed it aside and went back to work on my homework. The toy kept going off repeatedly, but since no one was home and I was in the kitchen while it was in the living room, I couldn't have activated it myself. I got up and took out the batteries. I pushed that experience away and just went on with my day. As the week went on, weird stuff started to happen. I was always sweating, which was strange since it was winter and I was anemic. If I weren't sweating, I could put my hand out, and there would be a hot spot just randomly beside me. Things would open and close and be thrown around my room when I was sleeping. One day I had gone to bed, and I experienced sleep paralysis. I couldn't move, but I wasn't in my room. I was in the woods, and it was very foggy. I saw a girl. She was standing across from me wearing nice white church clothes. Although she appeared well dressed, her face and hair were unkempt. Her hair was long, black, and tangled, her eyes were also black, and her lips matched her eyes. She was very pale, and she looked around 13 years old. The word Kelly popped into my head as she just stared at me. After I tried to say Kelly, I woke up sweating, and my closet and room door were open. I had closed them before I went to bed. From then on, I knew this was why things were weird. Kelly, the demon, was following me. She was latched onto me, but I didn't, and I still don't think she was trying to hurt me. She never hurt me, she just followed me. This activity went on for a year. My friends knew about her, and my sister knew about her. She occasionally communicated with me through sleep paralysis, but not very often at all. One day I had read that some demons can communicate through candles, so I decided to try with my sister. We sat, and I recorded, but nothing happened. I asked, "Do you not want to be recorded?" And the flame went abnormally high. I turned off the camera and sat there. My sister and I started asking Kelly questions like, "Is your name Kelly?" She answered yes to "Do you like me?" And also yes. If the candle went high, that meant yes, but if it dulled, that meant no. I jokingly asked, "Do you like my sister?" The candle went out. My sister and I had not blown it out, it went out completely by itself. That's when it started. Every night I would wake up to banging and my covers off my bed. I would wake up to things being thrown around the room, and it was terrifying. One night, everything went crazy. She was slamming my doors and trashing my room. I grabbed my Bible and yelled. I yelled, "By the power of God, leave me alone." 3 times, and then everything stopped. That was around a year ago, and I'm in 10th grade now. She seems to come occasionally to visit me. I still have no idea what this is, but I'm hoping someone can help. The first time I saw it, I was home alone. My brother was playing at the neighbor's house, and my parents were in town running errands for my grandparents. I was on the computer in the front room of our house. We had a stereo with a glass display on the desk next to the computer that you could use to see who was standing in the doorway behind you without needing to turn around. I heard the front door, very big, heavy, loud wooden door, close. Not slammed, just closed. I didn't think too much about it initially, but I never heard it open. I said something like, "You're home early," without really looking away from the computer. When no one responded, I looked in the stereo reflection and saw this tall black figure just standing in the doorway. I turned around and saw it walk off. I didn't see any facial features, hair, or anything. I saw just a very tall male figure that was level with the doorway. By the time I got up to look down the hallway, it was gone. I panicked and ran outside, just as Mom and Dad pulled into the driveway. I told them what happened, and Dad immediately searched the house but found nothing. It should also be pointed out that our whole front driveway is gravel, so you can hear anyone walking in the driveway. I heard nothing prior to the car pulling in. The second time I saw it was about a year later when I was outside riding Mom's horse. At first I thought it was Mom walking from the house down to the back fence of the house's yard to feed the chooks or something. When I really looked, I realized it was the same black figure from before. It walked right down to the back gate and then vanished. It scared the crap out of me that I went and got Mom to come down and help me put Scrumpy, the horse, away because I was too scared to be alone. Thankfully I haven't seen it since, but I've definitely felt the same presence on other occasions where I've been too scared to look in the direction I felt it was standing. The first time, I was living in my family's home alone to finish my final year of high school while both my parents were working away. I was sleeping in my parents' room, as my house was already creepy as is, but my own room felt especially creepy when I was alone. The door to their bedroom was to the right-hand side of the bed, and since this was in the middle of summer, I left it open so the AC could flow into the room. I woke up from a fairly deep sleep with a start because I could feel something watching me in the doorway. The feeling was so strong, and I froze. I was terrified and just laid there trying my best to pretend that I was still asleep. Even though I didn't look, there was no doubt that it stood there and stared at me for a good minute or so before vanishing. I burst into tears and didn't stop shaking for a good while after. I turned on every light in the house and didn't sleep until around lunchtime. The second time was about a year later, in a new house over 8 hours away from the first one. Same thing happened, except it was standing at the foot of my bed, and it was easier to fall asleep afterwards. Same intense feeling of being watched, and same feeling of being terrified. The third and last time it happened was yet again a year later, in yet another house, hours away from the previous one. It was again at the foot of my bed, and the intensity was the same. Every time I was way too scared to even breathe or move, let alone take a look at whatever it was. It hasn't come back again in recent years, thank God. But I still have no idea what it was or why it followed me around the country from 2002 to 2009. Some sort of evil creature chased me in my car. So tonight I wanted to go out because I wanted to practice my toge in my '93 Miata. I went out to my new favorite spot local to me. I was driving up the mountain, taking it easy and enjoying the views. When I reached the top, I parked in a designated stop/view area and took some videos and pictures of my car and the surrounding woods. While I was doing this, I started to get the feeling that I was being watched from the surrounding wilderness. I wasn't surprised and expected this, as it's the middle of the night, and there were more than likely predators out at night curious to see what the ruckus was. But then it got very intense suddenly, like ominously intense, so I started to wrap up what I was doing and was going to move locations to get a nice view of the stars and to just enjoy the scenery. I then had this overwhelming sense of fear wash over me out of nowhere, so I grabbed my speaker, that was playing music but at under 25% volume so as to not disturb the local wildlife that wanted to sleep, hopped in my car, rolled up the hand crank for both windows, reattached my steering wheel, put it into reverse, stalled it, and then took off. If you know anything about cars, you know Miatas are great in the canyons because of how light and nimble they are, although they are underpowered. I also pride myself on being a good driver and knowing my cars and my limits. Keep this in mind. When I started driving, I lost that urgent sense of fear, so I slowed down when I reached the store at the top where I parked to just get my bearings. I felt the soft feeling of being watched again, but that was it, so I started editing the photos and videos. Then again, I got hit with the overwhelming urge to run as much as I can. So I started driving again, and I have this overwhelming sense of dread, fear, and urgency. At this point, I'm driving at high speed in third gear, I lose the overwhelming sensations again, and they linger, so I back off the throttle, shift into fifth gear, and try to calm down, but, unsurprisingly, the feelings hit me with full force again, prompting me to drop a gear and attempt to escape. I am double laning, taking the apex, understeering, and oversteering, but the feeling keeps getting more intense as time goes on. And on this one straightaway, it feels like something is about to reach out and grab me from behind. At the next corner, I hit the brakes and turned in, and I swear I saw the reflection of two eyes in my mirrors, along with a long, tall figure less than 2 car lengths behind me. Seeing this, I hit the throttle, kicking the back of my car out and almost losing control, but I reel it back in. At this point I'm driving with little to no self-preservation. I'm getting so close to the inside of each turn I slide because of the dirt, and I'm kicking clouds up behind me. I lose it on a long sweeping turn where I hit my top speed, but following that is a series of low speed corners where it catches right back up to me, and I feel this sense of loss almost overpower me, but I just push the gas in more and keep trying to run. On the way down I pass some sort of Mercedes SUV going up the hill on a straightaway. I saw the headlights suddenly disappear right before the next corner. We were both on a straightaway, and all the feelings I had up to that point suddenly became non-existent, but I kept pushing hard. About 30 seconds later, they all came back full tilt, and I just kept going. About a minute later I see the thing in my mirrors again. I continued to drive hard, gaining and losing ground for the next 5 minutes or so, and then I passed a pickup truck. However, I began to lose those intense feelings again. I made a right at the stop sign and rode through all of the gears. The intense feelings came back when I hit 4th gear. I passed a gas station when I was driving, but I didn't stop because it was still so close to the area. But when I entered the lights that came onto the street, everything felt like it would be okay, but less than a second later, when I left the lights, those intense feelings hit me again. Although I was going so fast, I believe I was outrunning them. I was running towards a specific spot in my mind because there were many people in that area, which I believed would be the safest. As I drove faster and got further, the feelings got much less intense. As I approached civilization, I pulled over in the spot I decided was a safe zone. So there I stopped and shut the car off to let it cool off, and all I could smell was the brakes and tires from running it so hard. I hit up a few of my buddies who are local to the area, and they said they're not surprised that I saw something that might have been something like a skinwalker because there is a Native American tribe less than 10 miles, as the crow flies, away from the spot. I am a mildly superstitious person, so I know of some native folklore of stuff like this, but I don't believe skinwalkers are in this area. From what I know, Wendigos are mainly exclusive to the East Coast. But from a quick image search, it looked most related to a Wendigo. It was bipedal but could switch to 4 legs, it was pure white with orange/red eyes and could run upwards of 60 miles per hour plus. Earlier, I conducted a quick search and couldn't find any reports of the sorts. But then again, I am not very knowledgeable in this area. This was the most terrified I have ever been in my entire life, hands down. I do not have any history of mental illness. The area is Southern California, near Escondido. The mountain is practically surrounded by Native American tribes. I was at the top near 12:30 a.m. I share this story to mainly document what happened to me in case this happens to someone else or whatever. But if you can help identify this thing, I would appreciate it. I think there's a demon in my apartment. I think it started with the nightmares. I've had a history in the past with ghosts and ghouls. A ghost attached itself to my brother when we were younger and would angrily throw things at it. We named her Cadence. My sister said Cadence would play hide and seek with her, showing up in the corner of her eye only to duck out of view when my sister would turn to look at her. When I moved out at 16, cadence did not follow me. This is something different, more negative. It started earlier this week, like I said, with the nightmares. The first one was about Kisaragi Station. If you don't know what that is, look it up. I encountered many people at the station, and when I got on, I arrived at a giant field with a dog. I don't remember after that. I also don't remember the second nightmare. The third, however, was yesterday night. In it, I was being chased through a small portal under some stairs. Writing this now, I'm realizing my last apartment had a staircase with a giant hole under it. My cat ran under there once, and I felt nearly feral with the primal fear that gripped me when I got close to the hole. The person chasing me was a cannibal. I don't know how I knew. I just knew. We eventually came to a standoff. I was so close to her, but just out of her sight. She was looking away, but all she had to do was turn, and she did. She turned slowly, eyes wide as she stared at me. I stared back in complete terror. She saw me and reached out to me, gripping my hand harshly. I woke up slowly, filled with chest-crushing terror. I could still feel the woman's grip on my hand as I woke up, nearly crushing my fingers. For context, I sleep curled up every night. Sometimes I sleep on my back, but I never place my hand anywhere near the edge of my full-sized bed. I woke up with my hand dangling off the side of my bed, reaching out. I felt eyes on me from the closet, and I stared. With complete certainty, the only thought I had was demon. Spooked to hell, I stayed awake and considered asking my Catholic roommate to bless my room or at least the apartment. Silly, right? But my roommate had done it before, and it was all fine. Until my cat broke their Mary statue. After the statue broke, the smell started. Like something had rotted in our apartment. My roommate's senior cat started getting nervous, too. She used to never meow. She meows constantly now, and one time we even heard her on the other side of the apartment building while we were checking the mail. We just heard her screaming. Confused, we rushed back over to our apartment, on the other floor, and opened our apartment door to find the cat staring at the door and practically howling. This morning we found a huge bloodstain on my roommate's pillow. Frowning, I examined her cat because we suspected that it might have bled on the pillow. She was spotless. My roommate shrugged it off and washed the bloodstain off. Is the creature a demon? Can anyone give me some guidance on how to handle this? Paranormal experience in Venice? I got followed by wailing entities. I was in Venice this time last year, and I still can't get my head around how and why this happened. I was there for 3 nights. It was my first time in Venice, and I loved it. I was there with friends, but due to our poor planning, all 4 of us stayed in different hotels. I chose one near the station, which was an intimate hotel run by a religious family. It was a classic old Venetian villa facing a canal, and the place had a chapel and a garden and was full of religious merchandise and decorations throughout. My room was on the 2nd floor. You had to climb 3 sets of stairs, and on the top you were met with a marble square lobby with a round table in the middle. There were few rooms around this lobby, and the rest of the rooms continued on 2 corridors that stretched on either side of the lobby. My room was one of the ones attached to this lobby, a single room that looked over the canal. It was a simple small room composed of a single bed with a cross above the head, a basin, and a wardrobe. The hotel was affordable and cheerful, and I slept soundly for the first 2 nights. However, on my 3rd and final night, I experienced difficulty falling asleep, and the noise from a neighboring guest who was watching videos did not alleviate the situation. I had to knock on their wall around 1 a.m., after which they ceased the disturbance, allowing me to eventually fall asleep. But I remember feeling uneasy and agitated that night. I woke up sometime between 3.30 and 4.30, which wasn't unusual for me, as I don't sleep well. That's when I heard a group of loud wailing people in the building. It echoed into my room via the hall. At this point, I remember thinking that the source of this noise was either coming from the stairs or the bottom of them. I was initially annoyed, thinking they were a bunch of drunkards who came in after a night out. Then it suddenly hit me that the hotel had a 12 a.m. curfew. It was unlikely a group of people suddenly came out of their rooms to cause a commotion. I came to my senses, which made me more aware of this mysterious wailing. It was loud, almost in despair, and crescendoed over and over, echoing into the lobby. I came to my senses and realized the sounds were definitely not human. It's hard to explain, but something in me knew this was not alive, in one form or another, and humans could not make this noise. I have never, ever felt like this before. Then the wailing finally stopped. I was relieved. But what happened next is something that I will never forget. The sound resumed from the foot of my bed. The wailing sounds are coming from the foot of my bed, very much present, closer, and louder. I don't know what happened after that. I blacked out/passed out, and when I was conscious, it was around 7 a.m. I didn't experience fear, or relief, until later in the day, when I attempted to recount the events that transpired. To this day I can't explain what this is. I wasn't a paranormal enthusiast or believer, and I believed I would stay like this until proven wrong. I'm actually easily spooked and always thought I'd end up crying or screaming if I encountered a ghost. Ha! My theory is that my body just went into extreme fear after that thing came into my room and simply shut down, hence the passing out feeling. I think about this pretty often and got the chills while writing this. I'd love to hear what everyone thinks about this, thoughts, theories, etc. Thanks for listening. It followed me home. About 10 years ago I moved into a loft apartment in a building that had formerly been a Catholic school. The stone entryways on either side of the building still read boys and girls as it had been co-ed but gender separated. When I first moved in, it was extremely pleasant there, a very positive, homey feeling. My apartment had formerly been a classroom with windows all along the exterior wall and was always well lit by either the sun or streetlights. My dad lived nearby, and I visited him at least once a week. At the time he was getting a PhD in metaphysics and had become increasingly interested in the paranormal. Tarot, shamanism, witchcraft, meditation, star charts, Reiki, etc., and I knew he was practicing this in his home. I genuinely found it intriguing, and prior to moving into the apartment, I had lived with him for a couple of months, during which I felt generally comfortable and unafraid. About 2 months after I moved into the new apartment, the tone of it seemed to change. It wasn't really negative, and I struggle to describe what felt different. The former felt light and feminine, while the latter was harder and more masculine. I assumed that the initial excitement had faded. It steadily got stranger, however, and I began to feel that I was never alone in the apartment. It didn't feel frightening but more sad and awkward. Initially, I only felt it in my apartment, but eventually, I began to sense it as soon as I entered the building, as if it had seen me coming and was waiting for me at the door. It progressed to my cat noticing something and refusing to go near the entryway to my bathroom. She would often go towards the kitchen and meow like someone was there. At night she would go berserk as if being chased. She often ended up on a narrow ledge above my bed, but only during this time. I chalked this up to cat weirdness. Then I started to feel it too. The bathroom felt strange. Sad, like deep regret. I started avoiding the bathroom too, taking the fastest showers I could and hurrying through my morning routine. Since it was a loft apartment, the bedroom was raised about 4 feet off the main floor and separated from the main room by a tall, partial wall. From my bed, I could see into the bathroom, which was on the same raised level, and I could also see down the short staircase into the kitchen. Often when I was in my bed I could sense something move from the bathroom, down the stairs, and into the kitchen. Sometimes I saw darkness out of the corner of my eye, sometimes I only felt it but couldn't see it. I assumed I was just scaring myself because I disliked the bathroom. I finally told my dad about it, expecting him to laugh, but he only replied nonchalantly that he'd had experiences like that in his house before I moved in. His step-nephews had been visiting one night. Both were between 7 and 10 years old. While having dinner with them, one looked up past the kitchen and said a big black mass was floating in the doorway. No one else could see it, but the boy wasn't afraid and said it had disappeared. Dad said that after I moved out, he stopped feeling the presence and seeing shadows, and he assumed it was transient and had moved on. I did. It moved in with me. Things got exponentially worse when my boyfriend came to visit for a week. I'd mentioned how I didn't feel alone in the apartment but hadn't talked about the rest of it. The first night he was there, he woke me up to say that my cat was going crazy and had gotten up onto the ledge above the bed, but he hadn't seen her get up there, despite the fact he could see the entire length of it, and the back wall of the ledge was 12 feet tall. She was just suddenly up there. He was weirded out by it, but I told him cats often get the zoomies at night, and it was probably nothing. The next day I came home from work, and he was shaken. He said he'd been on his laptop on the couch and started to feel watched. Looking up, he saw a male figure staring at him from the kitchen. He said it was like a shadow person, but fearing it was an actual intruder, he ran towards it only for it to disappear. I then came clean about everything I'd experienced, and he got upset I hadn't told him. He started going to the library while I was at work to avoid being there alone. He often stayed up later than I did since I went to bed at 9 to get up at 5 for work, and told me he often saw shadows move from the bathroom down the stairs to the kitchen. He described them as small and close to the ground, like he was only seeing shadowy feet. His stay was extended to a month because I decided to move in with him, which was unrelated to the haunting, as he had primarily come to see if we could cohabitate well. The week before I moved was the worst by far. The apartment felt angry. While I was sitting on the bottom stair organizing books, My boyfriend faced me to hand me things, and I felt something walk by behind me that blocked the light as it passed. I started to say something, and he said the shadow man had walked by behind me from the bathroom in the direction of the bed. He was so disturbed he started to cry, saying it hated him and blamed him for me moving out. We decided to move me out a few days sooner and packed faster. During this time we didn't see anything else, though the apartment still felt charged and unwelcoming. I figured it would follow me to his apartment, but I haven't experienced anything I couldn't explain since. I still have no idea what it was, why it followed me, or why it stayed in that apartment. Being followed? So a couple of years ago I found out my mate was into communicating with the other side and all of those things. I've had some experiences as a kid but won't go into that, as we'll be here all day. He's been to seances and stuff and showed me the chain method. It spins clockwise for yes, counterclockwise for no, and side to side for maybe. Anyways, we're doing it, and from doing stuff, we found out there's some bad energy following me. That night I woke up to something tapping my shoulder. I looked over and saw a shadow figure leaving my room. We named this entity Shadow Man without realizing that it is common to encounter such beings. From then on life always seemed dull and dark. I was never happy. I seemed to always have bad luck. Whenever I tried using the chain, it would respond with a series of answers. Yes, maybe, no, maybe, yes, maybe, and so on. One day, we met, I showed him the chain, and he became extremely frightened. We then vowed never to attempt contacting the other side again and to forget that it ever happened. A couple of years later, he bumps into this medium again, and they get on the topic of the afterlife, and the medium tries to contact the other side with him. The medium then starts dripping with sweat and says that there is bad energy surrounding him for some unknown reason, and the conversation ends there. A couple of months later, I decide to do the chain again after about 2 years. It actually works now, so I start asking it about this shadow man, and through asking questions, I find out it's attached to me, if that makes sense. But when my mate and I did it for the last time, it went to him and has been with him ever since. He is experiencing the same symptoms that I did, but we never connected the dots. Apparently this bad energy is trying to pull him down and trap his soul, I was told on a voice box we used tonight after I told him what I found out on the chain the other night. My question is whether anyone has had a similar experience, and what insights do people have about it. Thank you for listening, and any advice would be appreciated. I have a ghost child following me. Let's start at the beginning. My family used to live in this neighborhood that was filled with townhouses. Well, one day we had a yard sale. There was nothing out of the ordinary. Until a little girl approached the yard sale by herself. This girl was probably 4 to 5 years old, she had blonde curly hair and blue eyes. We called the cops and tried to figure out where she lived. She didn't know where her house was, but she pointed in some direction. Once the cops came, they were able to figure out where she lived and took her home. I guess her mom fell asleep, and she just left. It was crazy. Years later we moved into the Corn State, we moved into a super small town. I literally lived behind the schools and walked to school the entire time we lived there. My family switched rooms a lot. At this point my room was by the hallway and kitchen, I had 2 doors. My brother's room, they were babies, was next to me, and my parents slept in the basement downstairs. Well, one night we were having a thunderstorm. It was late at night, and I was up watching TV, then the storm cut out the electricity. This happened quite a bit. A few seconds later I heard a little girl's voice say, "Uh-oh. Not again." I was terrified. The next night I felt someone sit on my bed and then jump off. My feet flew up. At first I thought my dog was jumping around, but he was outside with my stepdad. After that, nothing really happened. Remember how I said I lived right behind the school? Well, in middle school everyone would hang out at the playgrounds after school and on the weekends. Well, I started to notice that every time my friends and I were down at the park, a little girl with curly blonde hair and blue eyes always came down too. Whenever she came down, she said her mom was taking a nap, but she could come and play. We never saw her parents. 13-year-old me just thought she was an annoying little girl. Not someone from my past. Fast forward, and I'm now in the country music state. Nothing paranormal really seemed to happen. My mom and I believed 100% that our house was haunted. I told her that I have seen a ghost in my brother's room. His room was right down the hall from mine. He and his twin would constantly run up and down the hall messing with me. I would just lock my door and let them run. Well, the running would cause my door to shake, and you could hear it too. I remember one night I was up on my phone. It was super late, and everyone was asleep. The house was quiet, and outside was quiet. Then my door started to shake. It was just like when my brothers run up and down the hall. I was so scared I hid right under my blanket and turned to face the wall. After a few seconds, the door stopped shaking. I was on edge at night. I started to keep a light on because I started to get scared. I actually had a little routine. I would keep my big light on and change. I would plug my phone in and turn on my lamp to the lowest light. After that, I would call out good night to my brothers and ensure my door was fully closed. I would turn my light off and go lie down. I turned around one night, and I woke up, and my door was open. I know my mom wouldn't come and my brothers wouldn't, but then I saw the little shadow girl, and I heard her laugh. She ran from behind the door and into the hall like it was a game. I wasn't scared in that moment but more annoyed in a big sister way. I just went back to sleep. I haven't seen the young girl for a few years now. I honestly hope I do so I can get some answers. Followed by a demon. So it might sound bizarre, but when I was 17, I moved to a different country to attend the school there. Saint-Anne-de-Bellevue was a small little city near Montreal with a giant McGill campus next to it. There was really nothing special about the city, except for the large lake. So I was extremely lonely and vulnerable at that time. My whole life got turned upside down, and add shitty students and my social anxiety, and you got an antisocial kid with depression. Later, around late October, I started to get paranoid that someone was always next to me and following me around. I would walk down the street and feel a burning gaze on me, and it would make me turn around and anxiously look around. The haunting feeling never left me. When I am home, I feel the presence still. I started hearing unexplainable noises from upstairs even though I lived on the last floor. Constant thumping and creaking noises. I felt a presence in the darkest corner of my room as if something were there and looking at me. The dark figure had no distinct shape or form, yet it was still chilling and palpable. I thought I was getting crazy. I even contacted my aunt, who is a doctor, and asked her, "Am I going crazy if I am paranoid 24/7? She said, "You just might be under great stress," so I shrugged it off. Fast forward to March. I was already feeling quite exhausted, the sensation persisted, and I continued to sense the gaze and presence. Being Muslim, there were no mosques nearby for me to visit and pray, so I just kept chanting Bismillah to keep myself sane and safe, like my dad always taught. He said, "Whenever you are scared, talk to God, He will protect you." So I did. In March, it was my 5th month of being paranoid and terrified of my shadow, and I felt extremely suicidal and depressed. I didn't feel the joy of life anymore. Constant issues within myself only made it worse. I somehow managed to get through the last 2 months of terrible school and made it out. I got back home and was so relieved. But the feeling never left. It only got worse, and I actually started feeling physical touches of it. When I lay down, it lay on me. Whenever I pass the mirror, I feel like I see something there. I kept hearing unexplainable sounds and things moving and creaking. I slept with the Quran next to me every single night. It came to the point where I could not even sleep properly, feeling the gaze on me. I kept getting deeper into my depression and I felt even more numb than before. I kept seeing it. I saw a shapeless figure lurking in the darkest corner. It was dark and scary, radiating terror. I never felt so alone and helpless. One night I was scrolling through Wikipedia on my computer, and then something caught my attention. There was something next to me staring right at me, and it almost made my heart stop. That's when I decided it needed to stop. Before that, unfortunately, I made a lot of mistakes. I often tell myself that my actions were a result of the depression, but I now realize that I was simply overwhelmed by fear. I resigned from the university and went to my grandparents. I stayed at their home for quite some time. I decided that I no longer want to keep it in me, so I told my other aunt about the strange occurrences. Unlike my parents, she trusted me. Being from a country with a strong religion before Islam, we still have people who practice shamanism. My aunt contacted her and told her our situation, and the lady was kind enough to meet us at her apartment. Some people might say she is fake and a charlatan, but she never charged us, saying that it's her duty to help people in need, and I do believe that she has some powers we cannot fathom. She made a ritual. Put a candle next to me and instructed me to close my eyes and not to open them until she finished. She proceeded to chant prayers and gently tap/hit me with her ritual stick made out of animal hoof, leather, and wood. The candle went wild. The fire was raging, and the smoke went completely black, as my aunt told me. When she was over, it took about 5 to 8 minutes. I turned around and saw that more than half a candle was already burned and wax pooled on the plate. She said that I am followed by a demon that fed off my misery. She said it always latches onto the most miserable and desperate people who are alone and vulnerable, and it drives them crazy until the body gives up. She told us to buy a small lead ball or ingot, and we did that. Upon our return, she repeated the ritual, incorporating prayers and fire. She kept praying and chanting. The shaman heated the lead until it liquefied, and when she was nearing the end of the ritual, she threw hot liquefied lead into the footpan full of icy cold water. She did all this standing next to me while I was afraid of lead falling on me and getting burned. Fortunately, I was spared from burns and pain. The shaman then proceeded to take out the solidified lead out of the water, and when she showed the form of it, it gave me chills. It looked like an ugly face with little horns or something sticking out of it. Due to safety concerns that she mentioned, she never allowed me to take a picture of it. She explained to me what it was and what it needed from me and then carefully wrapped it in multiple layers of tissues, fabric, and plastic bags. The lady said that we should find a place where no one will ever find this thing and dig a hole to seal it in there. So we went to the big dumpster that's been in the city for so long and dug a hole big and deep enough to fit the lead form in. She advised us to bath in salted water to purify the body and clean the negative energy. And here I am, a couple of years later, completely free of worries and paranoid thoughts. It was a quick recovery process since I was paranoid as a leftover habit, but the first night after the exorcism was the calmest night in the longest time. I just wanted to share this, and maybe it will help some and interest others. I think I'm being followed by something. Backstory: since I could remember, I have had paranormal experiences. I grew up watching my mom and aunts play with a Ouija board, eventually playing with them and making my own as a teenager. I have experienced various occurrences in every place I have lived, yet each location presents a distinct set of phenomena. I lived with my cousin in my young teenage years, and this is where I saw the most activity. I witnessed handprints outside of second-story windows, cans knocking over when I was 3 feet away, pictures falling off walls, and objects not in their original places, among other things. The room my cousin and I shared filled me with an overwhelming sense of fear, making it impossible for me to be alone in there. Prior to me moving in, my cousin had multiple experiences in her room on her own, and in the house in general. Another house was my parents' house. They bought it together before they split up. I used to sleep with my TV on and would set the remote on the nightstand. I awoke in the middle of the night facing the wall and the sound of the remote dancing on the nightstand. I shut my eyes hard and forced myself back to sleep. In the morning I picked up my remote and tried to mimic the sound I heard, and I could only replicate it by rocking the remote back and forth end to end. Hard. In the same house but on another occasion, I was doing math homework. Upon scribing the answer to a question, I heard an older, angry woman in my ear shriek, "Wrong." Nothing was to the side of me but the wall. Fast forward to adulthood, and now I've had little things happen throughout each place I've lived. Mostly, I have experienced footsteps and the misplacement of items that I vividly remember setting down in different locations or orientations. On one occasion, I heard fingernails being dragged across the wall up and down the hallway. In my husband's and my last apartment, he had a door swing open on him only when I wasn't there. Just now, in my house, as I was taking a shower with only my dog in the bathroom with me, I heard a voice that sounded like my husband's whisper yell, "Hey," and then again, a little louder, "Hey." I had to pull the curtain back and actually look, only to see no one in the bathroom and my dog look up at me like I was nuts. I go to the bedroom to find my husband sound asleep with our toddler. We live with my best friend and her child in her house. No one has died here, the original owner is still alive, and my friend has owned the house for 1.5 years. Just today the TV went on the fritz, and the screen stopped working for my friend. Her boyfriend was over and he said his TV just started doing the same exact thing today too. This friend of mine and I have been best friends for 15 years and have been into all different kinds of shenanigans together. Thanks for listening. I'm being followed, again. So, my family and I have always been very aware that we're not alone. We're all believers in the paranormal due to experiences, and I honestly feel like I could write a book on what I've experienced alone. I feel compelled to share my experiences, as they are becoming increasingly unsettling for me. I do fear the paranormal, but sometimes this fear escalates into sheer terror, and that's what's happening at the moment. My first stalker was back in 2011, when my family lived in an old farmhouse. This house was incredibly haunted to the point where we had to get a priest in to perform an exorcism on my brother. He'd been possessed for quite some time and had tried and nearly succeeded in ending me 3 times in the 3 or so years that we lived in that house, but that's a story for another time. In the summer of 2011, when I was 9, I suddenly realized that a man was constantly following me. It all started about a week after my father moved back in with us. I always saw him, but never his face. The only way I can describe him is that he wore a long Victorian-esque trench coat that reached his ankles and a large top hat. His presence was never menacing, but it did terrify me. I would always see him in my peripheral vision, especially when I left the house and walked towards the end of the garden path. He would appear round the side of the garage. I'd see him in my room, on the stairs, in the bathroom, and even in the garden while I was letting out the chickens. When my mother's psychic friend came to visit, she said he wasn't evil. He appeared to be a protector, which makes sense seeing as though not long after I first saw him, my brother nearly ended me for the first time. This following lasted until summer 2013, when we moved out of that house. Last November he reappeared. But this time his presence wasn't the same. It was menacing. I was going through a dark period with my depression that got to the point where I was seriously contemplating negative stuff. It wasn't long after these feelings started that he reappeared. I saw him at the bottom of the stairs, in my bedroom doorway, and at the end of the kitchen when I closed the door and looked through the glass. It was absolutely terrifying and left me afraid to be home alone. My dad was also going through a dark period, where he turned into an ass and was quite insufferable. His tarot reader friend told him that the dark presence was linked to his mood and his anger. When my father emerged from his mood, the man vanished, and I have not encountered him since. I hadn't had any experiences for a few months, up until 2 weeks ago. I noticed something was different when my dog wouldn't sleep on the bed with me anymore. She'd start shaking when I put her on the bed, and if I moved my feet, she'd nope the duck out of there. My cat wouldn't come in the room and would sit in my doorway, hissing at my bed. This went on for about a week until I saw someone sitting at the end of my bed against the wall. I didn't see the actual person, but I saw someone sat there. It freaked me out, and I ended up sleeping on the sofa for 2 days. The night I went to sleep in my own bed again, I lay with my head at the end of the bed, on my phone. I heard a weird grunt noise and turned my head towards the door, and that's when I saw a small person standing in my parents' bedroom doorway. I saw them for a solid 5 seconds until they moved back behind the door. It didn't scare me like it normally would. This child was very small, I'd say the height of a 4 or 5-year-old. They were level with the bottom of the door handle's brass plate, so about 90 centimeters tall. I saw blonde curly hair but again didn't see the face. I have really bad vision and have lost my glasses, so I could make out the child but not the child's features. I don't remember seeing anything else, like clothes or a hand, I just remember the curly hair. For a split second my brain registered the child as my boss's son. But then I realized that it was 2 a.m. and that it wasn't Jackson. I didn't see him again until last night. I went to shut my bedroom door, looked down, and saw him. It only lasted a few seconds, but it made me jump. I would have screamed, but it was 2 a.m., and I've got 2 bunnies in my room. This time, though, I saw his face. He looked slightly like my brother did when we were younger, but also different. He had green eyes and the same mop of curly blonde hair. Once again I didn't see anything else but his head. His presence doesn't scare me like it normally would. And I'm not sure if it really is a child, or something impersonating one. Part of me thinks that he may be my older brother, who died in the womb. The likeliness between my living brother and this child is uncanny and slightly unsettling. I've told my mum about him, but I haven't told her who I think he is. I daren't, because the topic of my dead brother is still raw to her. If he'd survived, he'd have been 19 in April, and there would have been 18 months between us. He doesn't exactly frighten me, but the knowledge that he is pursuing me does. I'm not sure how to stop him from following me, or if I should. I think something evil is following my ex-roommate. So I've only told this story to a handful of people because it is still kind of shocking to me that I experienced this. So this is my first attempt at writing this story down. So a few years ago, I befriended a girl who had a really troubled past. She was really mentally unstable, but she was very kind to me, so I would keep her company. After only being a friend of hers for a few weeks, something terrible happened to the both of us. It was traumatic and affected us both greatly, but I soon recovered from it and stayed by her side as she dealt with it. The events that affected me would not have occurred if I had not been her friend, but I never held that against her because I believed she didn't mean to hurt me. I believed she didn't mean to hurt me. This context is essential for understanding the larger story. After what we experienced, we became closer because we went through it together. I suppose it resembles a trauma bond. So we begin to spend more time together. Time passes and I begin sensing something supernatural about her. She began to show me her different personalities, and at times, her tone of voice would drastically change too. It was strange, but it didn't scare me because I have a solid spiritual foundation and felt protected. She was an individual of considerable intensity, and she would often share with me that she heard voices and possessed the ability to perform supernatural feats. I honestly didn't believe her and thought she was in some kind of psychosis or was schizotypal. I still gave her a handout for support because I felt bad for her. She also always stressed that she felt presences around her. One day she was sitting on my bed, in a manic episode that she would regularly get into, and she screamed, "I am God," and the lights in my room turned off. I knew instantly that whatever just happened was evil. That same night, I went to sleep terrified and exhausted from being around her energy. I woke up the next morning to see the bundle of sage I lit on my table on the floor. My bedroom rug had about a 2-inch deep hole from the sage burning through it. I was in shock. How could the sage be flung to the ground like that while on fire? It didn't make any logical sense, and I realized my apartment could have caught on fire while I was asleep. I almost stopped being her friend that day, but the next day she begged to see me and told me how grateful she was to be around me. Again, I felt bad for her. A few months pass, and I experience a few other things being around her, like suddenly being able to hear people's angry thoughts around me even though they weren't talking. Strangely, their physical actions reflected what I was hearing. I really thought I was going crazy. I still kept being around her because it appeared that her energy was calming down and things were looking better for her, but I should have known. All of this leads up to the experience I've been most perplexed by. We eventually decide to move in with each other. Worst idea ever lol. I began to feel a presence in the apartment, and it wasn't a happy one. I began feeling uncomfortable alone, and when I would express to her how I was feeling, she would reassure me that I wasn't alone and she had always felt the same. That didn't make me feel better, but at least I knew I wasn't alone. One day we had come home from a party, and we both went to our rooms to sleep. I was in bed relaxing, drifting to sleep, when my roommate's voice began to fill my room. I still don't know if the voice was actually in my room or in my head, but I remember being confused and thinking, why can I hear her so loudly WTF? Then all of a sudden, her voice changed into this nasty, scary screeching sound that I immediately knew was a demon. While it was happening, I remember doing some kind of mental defense against it. After a few minutes it suddenly stopped. It was so surreal, I sat there replaying what happened over and over again. The demon seemed to mimic her voice to lure me in, and when it realized I was actually listening, it began screeching and speaking in a language I couldn't understand. We eventually went our separate ways. She was constantly having unexplainable bad things happen to her, and she even turned on me and went as far as to tell me that I ruined her life and brought terrible things upon her, which I knew wasn't true. It was just the evil/guilt speaking out of her. She did some other really horrible things that hurt me, but I truly believe it was a demon or a negative energy that was making her snap toward everyone who cared for her. She treated everyone in her life who expressed love to her in the same way. I always sensed she was going through an intense internal battle within her, and at times, the evil would win. Since exiting my life, I haven't experienced the negativity I felt around her, stopped feeling scared, and stopped hearing voices. I'm curious if anyone else has lived with or been around someone that has a negative attachment and if it has affected them in the way it did to me. It was so interesting that I was able to tap into a psychic ability while being around her. I may just be sensitive to it since I've experienced paranormal events since being a child. Chanting, following me on a trail. My ex and I were walking on a trail near my house, and around my area homeless people are known to frequent. Everything was par for the course, until I walked off the path and onto what seemed to be a deer trail. Initially, I saw a few deer, but later I heard what sounded like voices. I initially assumed it might be a homeless community camping nearby. We came across a deer, which lowered its head and crown of antlers and continued walking towards us until it was only 10 feet away, then disappeared into the forest. Okay, maybe the deer was sick or had a wasting disease, still strange behavior for a wild animal. I kept hearing voices until I realized they were actually chanting. Chanting at too low of a volume to register what the words were. As we walked deeper down that deer trail, I realized the chanting couldn't be from the homeless because it repeated itself. On a loop. The sound seemed to be repeating, even though the words themselves were not audible. And finally we came to what appeared to be a concrete tunnel at the end of the trail, and I had this odd feeling that if we didn't leave now, we'd die. Not dread, like terror. So we ran from that place, and well, the loop chanting followed us down the trail, all while I felt like we were being watched. So what I mean by that is, the sound of the chanting did not grow fainter from behind us as we ran. It stayed the same volume, as if it were following us. Later my ex told me people went missing there and some died. I heard rumors throughout my life to avoid deer trails. What happened that night? Do things follow us? Over the years, I've started to wonder if there might be something that has a tendency to follow me or my family and disrupt our lives a bit. If there is any truth to this mindset, I believe it originates from my mom's side of the family rather than my dad's, as it primarily seems to affect the girls, including my mom. So the origins of this would be with my mom. Her childhood wasn't the greatest. My mom came from a broken family, and her birth was a desperate attempt by her parents to save their marriage. Her mom walked out of the family home when my mom was just 13, after spending years in a fairly explosive and physically/emotionally unpleasant marriage. Consequently, my mom's childhood revolved around taking on the role of a surrogate lady of the house. She cooked, cleaned, and managed the house while her dad internalized and distanced himself from any parental responsibilities, aside from providing an income. Suffice it to say, her childhood home wasn't the happiest of places. Anytime she discusses anything to do with the paranormal, my mom refers to this house as a starting point. She remembers waking up at night from nightmares, demanding things get out in a demonic voice that she could never replicate. She can recall being thrown across her bedroom by an unseen force. Another instance is her being pushed down the staircase from the top step, crashing down onto the tiled hallway below. No broken bones, miraculously, but certainly not the greatest of experiences to have as a kid. Her brother, who was sent on to boarding school, would spend the summer at home. In one instance, he can recall waking up in the middle of the night, his attention being drawn to his floor-to-ceiling wardrobe. There, at the top, was a child. The child, whose gender has never been specified, was sitting cross-legged on top of the wardrobe, looking down intently and unblinkingly at my uncle. He threw the duvet over his head that night and refused to re-emerge until morning. Fast forward a few years, my mom's married to my dad, I come along, and we move up north. The county we moved to has an incredibly detailed history from Celt to Roman to Pict to Briton to Viking to Saxon, etc. This particular area we moved to was, and still is, fairly built up and tailored toward tourists. My dad got a job as park warden there for the local caravan/campsite, and we moved into a static caravan on-site before moving into the gatehouse. Things picked up again from there. Dad went from hearing security alarms go off with no culprit ever seen to being shoved hard in the back and nearly sent into the nearby lake while standing on a jetty at the end of his shift. I should note that in the case of the latter incident, my dad was alone, so he could not easily dismiss it as a faulty alarm system. Back at the gatehouse, my parents both witnessed hands waving at them in the mirror, knuckle side facing them. At night, creatures would crawl up the curtains, but they could never be found during the daytime. As a baby, I was given mild sedatives because I was terrified at night and would scream when being taken to bed. It later became clear that I had been afraid of a man at the top of the stairs. Figures would be seen walking through the hallway and out through the front door, through the front door. The worst thing for Mom was having a nightmare one night. She was dressed in Victorian petticoats, racing down the road from where we lived. She was being chased, but she knew if she looked back, her pursuer would catch her. She raced straight into the center of the town, cutting through the local St. Mary's churchyard. At some point she ended up falling into an open space in the ground, and her pursuer, an invisible force, landed on top of her, pinning her head into the ground but also forcing her to look up and read the epitaph. My mom was too terrified to really comprehend what she was reading, and what wasn't helping was the fact that she was also wide awake in bed, her head being pushed deep into the pillow as she screamed out for my dad. Her fear had made her voice turn into a strangled whisper, though, so he didn't hear a thing. Then it stopped. As soon as it had all started, it stopped. 2 weeks after that nightmare, it transpired that there'd been an exorcism at a nearby hotel where guests had complained of similar events happening to them. The same night my mom had had that nightmare. Fast forward a few more years. I was in my teens, my sister had now joined us, and we'd moved back to the same childhood town of my folks. My sister was now going through a phase of witnessing a man appearing at night, emerging up through the floorboards at the foot of her bed, and walking out onto the landing before turning left and merging through the wall into the neighbor's house. As we lived in a renovated pub, which had been split in two, after providing a description of this character to some of the locals, it transpired the guy was the old landlord of the pub who'd passed away a year before we moved in. This apparition stopped when Dad put some hardboard up to create a makeshift hallway for a loft conversion. A couple more years later, we've done a house swap with my mom's dad, and we're back in her childhood home. Full circle. My sister Bagsied my mom's childhood bedroom, as it was the bigger room, and she got to have a fireplace. I was fine with the newly refurbed attic space. Mum was in her parents' old room, and my dad, owing to his snoring, was allocated the spare bedroom, my uncle's old room. Well, you can imagine, can't you? My sister soon started hearing things. Footsteps walking about but no one there. She'd see things in the dark, and it would creep her out enough to hurry into my mom's room and share her bed. Mum resumed her old habit of yelling "get out" in her sleep, using that same demonic voice, which frightened my sister even more. However, since she faced the choice between scary mum and disembodied figures, she chose to stay in bed with the former rather than go alone with the latter. All of us girls in the family refused to head up the stairs in the darkness. Lights had to go on every time. Even if we were halfway up the stairs, we'd have to run back down, switch the lights on, then head back up again. One night my sister heard the living room door slam shut and heavy steps coming upstairs, slowly approaching Mom's room, which she was once again staying in, before hurriedly walking away when my sister tried to get a better look at the owner of the sounds. In the morning, the living room door was wide open when they both got up and was left wide open when they went to work, or school, in my sister's case. It was closed fast when I got downstairs a few hours later. We've all moved out of that house now, and my sister and I have our own places. I'm still experiencing the odd one or two events, my sister does not so much. I guess I've just managed to convince myself that the girls in our family are a magnet for paranormal-like activity. Werewolves kept following me. Hi all, so, I've been followed by werewolves for a couple of years now. It started when I was smoking a cigarette outside at night. I felt a sense of dread as if a spotlight were on me and something were watching me, even though I couldn't see it. Then, I noticed a large, shaggy figure illuminated at my neighbor's backyard fence across from mine. It was standing in front of the porch light so I could see directly its shadow cast by the light. For a few seconds, the figure stood trying to intimidate me with its posture before ducking down out of view from the fence. This experience was my first encounter. As the months go by, I end up in jail. Most of us know how that goes, but this is relevant because I had at least 10 dreams pertaining to encounters with werewolves and fighting them and or killing them, and it was in my dreams that I first learned what they smell like. Imagine rotting flesh mixed with armpit sweat and wet dog, it's awful. As I got closer to my release date, a feeling that something's going to follow me manifested, and I was right because I have encountered at least 2 werewolves. One was white and looked like the Howling One, and the first time I saw it, it was behind a fence with its face covered in blood, looking at me once again across my backyard behind the neighbor's fence, different city, different house, though. All sorts of peculiar and paranormal shit happened, like motion lights going off a lot and movement outside, and it was a horrendous night because my room didn't have any curtains, and I kept seeing running back and forth from the roof ledge bits of arms here and ears there, and the best way I can describe the white one's ears is like Easter bunny ears mixed with canine. We're talking underworld shit. I would hear heavy thuds that sounded like the creature jumping off the roof and landing on the grass. And I was tripping the duck out because I woke my roommate up and got him to lie on my bed and see it from my perspective to see if he could spot the creature, and he didn't, and that's when I saw the black one on my neighbor's roof from my other window. It had thick digitigrade legs and a wide V-shaped torso and arms that hung past its knees, and it was in a semi-squatting position. It had the head of a bear, featuring a very furry mane, along with a wolf's face, a slender snout, and luminescent eyes that were mainly gray with a yellow tint. The pupils were round rather than slitted. It started at me, and I ducked off out of view, but it freaked me out. And I had trouble sleeping that whole night. I didn't get aggressive vibes from it but curiosity. To this day, strange occurrences still happen. For example, I hear my backyard door rattling, along with grunts and commotion outside. Despite having moved to a different house 3 times so far, there are still no crickets chirping outside, which is unusual for summer and indicates the presence of a predator. Like eerie pure silence, I'm still having dreams about getting attacked by werewolves, but somehow I brutally put up a fight, like ripping snouts off and full-on King Kong versus dinosaur ripping jaws apart. I never die, but I wake up usually in the middle of the fight when I'm winning. I'm just saying this is what happened, no exaggeration. It is also worth mentioning that I have special gifts to boot. I'm an empath as well, and I can see invisible entities such as ghosts. I also have precognitive abilities and can detect something before it happens. I'm also an INFJ personality type, and I mention this in case you can find a correlation, but there are other abilities I possess that I prefer not to disclose. Anyhow, as a conclusion, I'm eagerly open to your guys' theories or remarks about why these werewolves are following me and why I'm having dreams about fighting them. Prior to this, I had no enemies and usually kept to myself, so I am unsure why I'm in this situation. Thanks a bunch. What followed me home? I swear this all to be true. I'm at my wit's end trying to figure out what I'm dealing with. I have 2 young children to protect, so I have to know what it is so I can figure out how to protect them from it. I have had some strange things happen over the last 8 years, but the worst started about 4 years ago. I feel like this needs background information, so here goes. I have been a Christian all my life, albeit not always practicing as I should, and have never really had any encounters with or interest in the paranormal. I had 2 children, whom I had quite young, and lived a mostly normal life up until I turned 22, when my girlfriend/baby mama and I moved back into my childhood home, a small rundown shack in the middle of the woods of Maine. The nearest full-time neighbors lived like a mile away. This home was surrounded on 3 sides by thick, dense forest, and on one side, the forest was actually a state university tree farm, so the trees were all planted in creepily perfect rows. At 22 I found out I had Chiari malformation type 2, and it required surgery to correct. At this point in my life, both of my children were already born but not very old. My oldest was almost 2, and my youngest was only a few months old. They scheduled the brain decompression surgery for August 13, 2013, and initially it all went well. But a few days later, we learned that the dura patch they put on during surgery had ruptured, and they had to fix it. No big deal, right? However, they also mishandled that surgery, resulting in a staph infection in my brain. This leads to a third surgery. I promise I'm getting to the supernatural stuff, but this background/setting feels important to me. During the third surgery, I died on the table, was brought back, and then spent 4 days floating between life and death in the ICU. According to the doctors, I should not have made it. They were telling my parents to notify the rest of the family that they needed to come see me now or forever hold their peace when I sat upright in bed to say hello to my parents, girlfriend, and children. Something within me shifted that day, and I have yet to fully understand what it is. I managed to make it out of the ICU and was stuck at home tethered to an 4-pole with a PICC line for 8 weeks of serious antibiotic treatment to stop the staph infection in my brain. Skip ahead to Christmas Eve of 2013. I am having a small party with some friends of mine, and my girlfriend/baby mama has taken the kids to her parents' house so they wouldn't have to deal with a bunch of drunk young adults. I don't drink and didn't dare to do this soon after these surgeries, but my friends were typical young 20s. She called me at 9 o'clock that night to inform me that she and the kids were not coming back. Our relationship was over. This was the beginning of 4 full years of isolation in this house, with nobody and nothing to talk to except those 4 walls, a mile away from the nearest human beings, and me, being still practically fresh out of surgery with a year of expected recovery time still to go. I couldn't drive at the time and couldn't for about 2 years afterwards. After that night, I found myself having vivid dreams of things that would come true over 80% of the time, and I found that I had knowledge of things I should not have known, details about other people's private lives, I was able to sense motives, and I had intimate knowledge of how to solve problems, both personal and otherwise, that I had no experience with and should not have known. Obviously this scared me quite a bit, since there are only so many sources of these gifts related to my Christian faith, and most of them are demons. To this day, I believe that I was or am possessed in some way, possibly in a symbiotic relationship with whatever entity entered my life after God saved me in the hospital. I have sought help but have found none, so I have accepted it at this point and try to use the gifts for good. However, this is only the precursor to the point of this. I had made peace with my unhappiness and the silence of being totally alone, and I was beginning to settle in. I had gotten to the point where I would often lie on my lawn and gaze at the stars or have a little fire in my little fire pit until I was too tired to keep feeding it. I was completely comfortable. It was around this time that I had really started researching the paranormal, trying to identify what might be the source of my newfound gifts, and I had fallen down the rabbit hole into all kinds of cryptids, my favorite among them being the skinwalker. One evening, I had gone to the local store just before dark to get some smokes and basic grocery stuff, because food is life, right? And I arrived back at my home after dark. It was a fairly well-lit night, with stars and a partial moon. I could see everything in my yard. There was nothing out of the ordinary, everything seemed fine. As soon as I shut my car off, I was overcome with an overwhelming sense of dread and immediate danger. I fought the panic for a few seconds, but it bested me pretty quickly, and I dashed to my porch as quickly as I could. It was maybe 30 feet from where I parked. I flicked the porch light on and stood there, scanning the tree line for anything that might have caused this. There was nothing there. Nothing at all. Now, the woods in Maine are quite lively day and night. There are all kinds of wildlife noises at all times, day and night. But not this night. There was no sound at all. So I noped the duck off my porch and went straight inside, locked the door behind me, and tried to calm the sense of panic. Every night for the next 2 years until I was in a position to finally move out, it was the same. The woods would be lively during the day, but as soon as the sun went down, you could hear a pin drop on the grass from 50 yards away, and it was always coupled with that same overriding sense of dread and panic, to the point where I put a deadbolt on both front and back doors and storm shutters to keep whatever it was out. I am convinced that something followed me home that day, and whatever it was, it stayed. I wonder if it was drawn to whatever energy I had been putting out since my run-in with death, but thankfully it hasn't found where I live now. Yet. I do not scare easily. I am a big burly man who hunts and just generally isn't someone that people go out of their way to duck with, but whatever it was made me feel totally helpless every night for 2 full years. I have sought help, but nobody seems to have any answers, so I'm here asking for your help. What was stalking me for those 2 years? And what happened to me in the hospital? Possibly a ghost following us. So, to start out, We've had paranormal activity in the last 3 houses we've lived in over the last 10 years. Never thought anything of it at first, but now that it's followed us to our brand new construction house, I'm convinced it's attached to us or an item I own. House number 1, tons of electrical anomalies. Lights are flickering, and the TV is turning on and off by itself. Security camera footage shows our lamp turning on and off, but in person nothing happens. I chalk this up to an electrical issue. It was a double wide, so not out of the realm of possibility, but on one particular occasion, we were joking about all of this being a ghost. My 6-year-old daughter asked the ghost to turn off the TV if it was present, and it did. Fast forward to our departure from that house, we jokingly remarked to the ghost, "You are welcome to join us if you wish." Our second residence, however, is an older home constructed in 1980. Beautiful and tucked away in the woods. The activity here was again random flickering lights, but in addition, an audible sigh was behind me in the middle of the night while everyone else was asleep and I was using the restroom. However, a portrait hung on a 1-inch long nail, left by the previous owners, was the main focus. Well, this portrait fell off the wall and shattered. There was no one in the living room. No one hit the wall or shook anything. We even tested out how on earth it could have fallen afterwards, and there was no clear answer. It simply didn't make sense. But again, when we left, we jokingly said, "Ghost, you can come with us if you like." Moving on to house number 3, brand new construction in a new neighborhood only 2 miles from the previous home. Absolutely no possibility for electrical issues here. But sure enough, again, we have unexplained electrical anomalies. This time, 3 different Xbox gaming consoles plugged into 3 separate outlets are randomly turning on and off on their own. Not all at the same time, of course. Separate occasions, but still. What are the odds? It's never happened before. Another thing is my husband's PC. In our bedroom, at night before bed, we hear something typing on the keyboard. This is an extremely clicky keyboard, and the sound is unmistakable. This has happened more than 10 times since we moved in only 4 months ago. Both my husband and I have heard it. He changed the keyboard, and his PC was in sleep mode. The monitor can only be turned on with a button on the back or by clicking any key. My husband and I woke up in the middle of the night to the monitor turning on by itself. A few other things happened, like hearing 3 consecutive knocks on the wall next to me in my bathroom in the middle of the night while everyone else was asleep. The knock could have only come from inside my closet. So, that's my story. Please let me know what y'all think. Is this a ghost? Is it attached to us? Or are these all random incidents? Any advice is welcome. I just wanted to share my ghost story. Something followed my aunt back from Bangladesh. This is my aunt's story, which happened to her when she was 15, back in the early 2000s. My family is from London, but we are ethnically Bengali. This story starts when my aunt and her family all went for a trip back to our ancestral country of Bangladesh. They visited her father's village, or I should say my grandfather's village. It was in the middle of nowhere surrounded by endless paddy fields. The village consisted of a few really old houses, dating back to the days of colonial Britain, all built around a big pond. There was a small mosque nearby, and further away from it was a small forest. The village elders warned my aunt and her siblings against venturing into the forest, where an ancient banyan tree stood. According to them, that specific banyan tree was supposedly haunted. One evening my aunt and her siblings, along with some of the village children, went into the forest to play, despite being warned not to go over there. The village children assured me that they played in the forest many times and nothing happened to them, as long as they didn't go near that tree. The children showed my aunt and her siblings the infamous tree, and they all agreed to stay away. The tree looked very old and creepy with its trunk twisted and its branches protruding far and wide. Despite its appearance, my aunt was not so gullible, being one of the older children in her family. She found all this talk of haunted trees to be silly and just a tall tale told by the elders of the village to scare the children. However, she agreed to stay away. My aunt wasn't playing, as she felt that she was too old for such childish games and was only there to supervise the youngsters. The kids started playing it and then afterwards played hide and seek. The village children started begging my aunt to play with them and to be the seeker. After a while of persuading, she agreed and reluctantly started to count as the kids started to run and look for the best places to hide. Once she was done counting, she went on the hunt to look for them. She managed to find a few of the kids quick enough, mainly the younger ones, but a few were left yet to be found deeper in the forest. My aunt walked further in, and shortly after, she happened to stumble upon the banyan tree. She smirked and decided to caress the ancient bark of the tree, going against her promise. She saw that one of the tree's boughs hung low and thought it would be a nice spot to sit for a while and take in the scenery. After the short respite, She pressed on. When she found all the kids, they all decided to finish the game as it was dusk and the forest was growing dark. Everyone heard the call to prayer from the mosque nearby, so they all proceeded to walk out of the forest and back home. That night, my aunt awoke mid-sleep due to the heat. In the village there were no streetlights, so everything was pitch black, and all you could hear were the sounds of crickets and frogs from the pond. She tossed and turned as she tried to go back to sleep but started hearing a peculiar noise outside her open window. It was a metallic clinking sound. The sound grew persistent, clinking every second. She looked through the grate of the window and saw nothing but the night staring back at her. She decided to call out quietly, hoping for a response, but nothing. Shortly after, the sound stopped, so my aunt brushed it off, thinking nothing of it, and went back to sleep. After a few days, the family left my grandfather's village and was heading back to the city airport. Their trip had come to an end, and it was time to return home, back to the UK. While they were saying farewell to everyone, my aunt saw a woman further behind from everyone else, staring at her. My aunt had never seen that woman before during their stay. She thought, why had no one introduced her to the woman, as the village was all family-oriented. What was very strange was that the woman was dressed in a traditional red bridal sari with a garland around her neck, golden bangles on her wrists, and a headpiece hanging down her forehead. My aunt asked one of her sisters who that bride was, but her sister couldn't give her an answer due to the commotion. My aunt's eyes wandered around as they lined up to board at the airport. Nothing but families all seated and waiting for their respective flights. She then caught a glimpse of a woman in a peculiar red sari. She realized it was that same woman from the village. The woman was further away from the waiting line, just standing in one place and looking at people walk past her. My aunt found it odd that she was at the same airport as them despite being seen at the village earlier. Also, what was strange was that the woman was in her bride's attire in the middle of a busy airport, which would be completely unheard of over there. She had no luggage with her or anyone accompanying her. On board the plane, my aunt was coming back from the bathroom and was surprised to see the woman again, sitting alone and staring out of the window. She asked my grandmother if she had seen the woman in the village and asked who she was. My grandmother was too tired to answer and dismissed her question. My aunt concluded that the woman must have been from one of the nearby villages and was passing through theirs as she was also heading towards the airport. She then tried to forget all about it. Back home in London, after a good few days, my aunt and her family all went to visit another one of my uncle's houses. It was a tradition to visit relatives when returning home from a visit to Bangladesh. When they all entered the living room and greeted everyone, my aunt was absolutely shocked to see the same familiar woman in the red sari from the village and the plane. My aunt was very puzzled but thought that the woman must have been related to the family. This was proof. Everyone was talking, and my grandfather was recounting their time in the old country. My aunt observed the woman standing silently in the corner, listening to the conversation, which she found strange. My aunt also realized that the woman never spoke a single word and couldn't recall anyone ever speaking to her since they entered the house. She wondered why the woman was still dressed up as a bride and found it very bizarre. When it was time to eat, everyone was getting ready to sit down at the table. My aunt was one of the last ones to get up but realized the woman was staring at her and smiling. She decided to say hello to the woman and ask her who she was in Bengali. The woman didn't respond, she just continued to smile at my aunt. She thought the woman was just shy, as that was quite normal behavior for village women in Bangladesh. She felt a bit awkward and started complimenting the woman's attire and her pile anklets. "Who are you speaking to?" my uncle said across the room in Bengali. The room was silent, and everyone was staring at my aunt in confusion. My aunt pointed at the woman, bewildered by my uncle's question. "What? There's no one there." My aunt's sister responded. My aunt thought everyone was playing a joke on her but shortly after realized they were all being serious. She started to freak out. She kept saying that there was a woman in the room, but everyone kept insisting that there wasn't anyone there. Everyone started worrying as my aunt was hyperventilating at the sight of the mysterious red figure smiling back at her. She eventually passed out. A while later, my aunt came around and found herself lying on the couch, resting her head on my grandmother's lap and her sisters all huddled beside her. My aunt didn't see the woman anymore where she had previously been standing. My aunt darted her eyes around the room to double-check if the woman was still there. She wasn't. On the opposite couch, there was an imam from the local mosque. He was a family friend and a respected community leader called over by my uncle. The imam asked my aunt what happened, and she explained that she saw the woman first in the village and kept seeing her until that very day, and only she was able to see her, as confirmed by everyone else. After careful consideration, the imam said it sounded like some nefarious entity had followed her from the village and latched itself onto her. My grandfather started to interrogate my aunt about the forest and the old banyan tree, and eventually she admitted to everyone that she sat on the bough of the tree. When my grandfather heard that, he got very angry and scolded her. He repeated that the tree was haunted and questioned why she didn't listen to the village elders. My aunt explained that she thought it was all a joke. When the imam asked why my grandfather had thought that the tree was haunted, my grandfather never gave an explanation and said that he would tell him afterwards in private. The imam recited some prayers and blew on my aunt. My aunt couldn't remember most of that encounter, as she blacked out again. However, according to everyone present in the room, she started to freak out and started to act manic when she heard the prayers. She started growling, and her eyes looked like they were about to burst from their sockets. She attempted to lunge at the imam, but everyone held her down. A while later, the imam left the house and eventually returned and gave her special water to drink daily and oil to rub her body with every time she bathed. This was all part of a long exorcism process known as ruqya in Arabic. That night, my aunt was too afraid to sleep, so my grandmother slept in the same bed next to her while one of her sisters slept on the top bunk. My aunt awoke after a long slumber. Her eyes started slowly adjusting to the darkness, but she was still in a sleepy haze. She realized she could hear a clinking sound to her right, towards the window. She thought it was her sister causing a racket, so she groggily told her to be quiet. When the noise didn't relent, my aunt turned and looked towards the window. It wasn't her sister. To her absolute horror, my aunt saw a dark figure sitting on the windowsill. She quickly realized that the metallic sounds were the sounds of bangles and anklets being played with. My aunt's eyes fully adjusted to the dark, and it became evident that the figure was indeed that of the woman. My aunt screamed her lungs out, and the whole house awoke. The second visit from the imam explained to my aunt that whatever she kept seeing would not go away on its own. She would continue to see it unless she completed her religious treatment, which he reminded her was a very long process. My aunt's family was certain that it was a spiritual matter and not a psychological one. My aunt never displayed any signs of mental illness in the past. Days passed, and my aunt saw the woman everywhere, though she did get occasional respites from her. The woman would show up one day and might follow my aunt wherever she went, but the next couple of days she would not be seen at all. She would see the woman at school standing by the whiteboard in her classroom, looking at the pupils like she was teaching the lesson. The woman would be seen when my aunt was hanging out with her mates in the park after school, just watching them from the trees. When my aunt would go shopping in the supermarket with her family, the woman was there waiting for her at the aisles and always followed them far behind as they shopped. Some days it would be in the same room as my aunt, other days it would be seen through the window on the street. Some nights when my aunt was lying in bed, she would hear the slow clinking sound of the woman's anklets going up the stairs. The sound would stop whenever it reached my aunt's bedroom door, as if the figure were waiting to be let in. The woman was once encountered when the family were all sitting at the table to eat, and my aunt found her sitting under the table with her forehead resting on her knees. She screamed surprisingly but quickly disregarded the matter in order to not scare her family. The ominous figure never spoke. It never harmed my aunt directly or made any threatening acts towards her. The woman just smiled that eerie smile. My aunt continued her religious treatment, which in turn made her very weak and sapped her spirit. The imam would visit her often, and she would have many more exorcism rituals carried out on her, all she could never recount. My aunt tried her best to get on with her life and started to get used to the figure always being around that she stopped feeling afraid of it. She even started to talk to it. She used to talk about random things, and the woman just responded with silence. Although she got close to the figure at times, my aunt never dared to touch it. A couple of years passed, and the mysterious woman would appear less frequently, like only a couple of times a month. Eventually she stopped appearing altogether and was gone for good. My aunt completed her years-long spiritual treatment. She felt a huge relief, but at the same time, in a very bizarre and twisted way, she felt sad and empty. That figure was in her life for so long that she grew so accustomed to it and saw it as normal. For her, not seeing the woman anymore was a huge change in reality. This whole ordeal did take a huge mental toll on her throughout the couple of years, and my aunt was never truly the same after that. One afternoon my grandfather decided to shed some light on the past as he felt like it was the right time for my aunt to learn the truth. He showed her a very old black and white photograph dating back to the 50s. It was him and his parents and siblings all in a family portrait. My aunt's eyes widened and her jaw dropped as she saw an old, familiar face in the center of the photo. It was her. The woman in the bridal sari. Garland, bangles, everything. She was next to a man dressed as a groom. My grandfather explained to her that long ago, he had a sister. That photo was from her wedding day. The story was that she was married to a man from the neighboring village, but she did not want to get married to him. My grandfather's sister was at first promised to another suitor since they were children. A good, kind man from another nearby village. She grew up with the idea that she would marry that man when she came of age. However, the man she ultimately married offered a larger dowry, leading her father to change his mind and accept that man as his daughter's husband, despite the previous arrangement and her daughter's protests. In Bangladesh, it's the father's word over his daughter's wishes, and she was doomed to spend her entire life with a man she did not desire. So in the night, after the marriage ceremony was completed, she was due to move in with the groom and his family and relocate to the other village. My grandfather's sister did not hesitate and ran off in a frenzy in the dark, never to be seen again on her wedding night. The next morning when she was found, it was deep in the forest, hanging by her neck from a branch of the old banyan tree. My aunt could not believe it while she heard the story as her eyes welled up with tears. When the imam visited the house one day, he clarified that what my aunt encountered was not my grandfather's sister. It was a jinn who took the form of her and followed my aunt back home to London. For those who don't know, jinns are demons in the Islamic world. In Islam, there is no notion of ghosts being trapped in their last moments of life. There are only the jinns that imitate the deceased person and prey upon people. The reason why the old banyan tree was perceived as haunted by the villagers was not only because of my grandaunt's tragic demise. A few other horrific events happened revolving around that tree in the past. Once, a passing traveler was caught stealing jewelry from the village, chased by the villagers into the forest, and hacked to death with machetes. The thief's body was slumped down, resting on the trunk of the banyan tree, with his blood painting the bark red. Another story was that a witch was caught doing black magic deep in the forest where bloody rags and torn up pages of the Quran with black markings and grids scribbled all over were found hanging from the tree. Whoever interacted with that tree always reported to experience some sort of supernatural activity one way or another. That day, when my aunt first explained to everyone about the woman, my grandfather had a strong feeling that she was talking about his deceased sister. I didn't remember this whole ordeal when it happened at the time because I was very young, but the story was told to me by various family members when I was older. It was only recently that my aunt and I were talking at a family function, and she retold her story to me herself in the utmost detail. Her story was always the focal point whenever the subject of the paranormal arose during family conversations. A couple of people think my aunt was just suffering from mental illness during that time, although this doesn't make any sense. My aunt never knew of my grandfather's sister before that revelation. My grandfather never once mentioned or showed a picture of his sister to either my aunt or her siblings while they were growing up, nor did my grandmother. It was a painful, touchy subject, and it was never heard or mentioned. I believe my aunt, and this was very real to her, and it greatly impacted her life growing up, as it permanently left a mark on her. I'm just glad that she is back to normal and that the woman in the red sari is gone for good. A dark, tall person has been following me since my childhood. Hello. This will be a little longer read since I encountered this at first when I was a teen. It all started when we were playing hide and seek in the construction site next to my house. I was the seeker, and when I walked up to the balcony, I saw a tall, black, shadowy figure walking next to our fence. That was the first time I had seen this figure. A couple of weeks later, while visiting my friend's house and playing hide and seek, I passed by their parents' bedroom, looked inside, and saw a shadowy figure peeking at me from behind the bed. This time, I was able to see it in more detail, and it was a tall figure dressed entirely in black, with no face and wearing a black hat. That was the first time I got really spooked, and I told my friends later on what I had seen. However, they did not believe me. After a couple of years I had not seen it anymore. I had just a couple of weird feelings and encounters until I graduated and moved to the capital of my country, and I moved in with my now ex-boyfriend. I always had a very bad feeling when I was alone that somebody was with me in the room no matter where I was until I met my neighbor, and she was some kind of a witch. After moving to our new apartment, I began to see this person again in our home, but only when I was alone. It was standing in the entrance to our apartment just watching, or when I was taking a shower. I literally jumped because something said my name out loud in the bathroom. Then one night while I was playing, that was the scariest encounter. A face came from my left side directly to my face, and that made me jump and scream. At that moment I stood up and told you out loud, I don't know who you are or what you are, but leave me freaking alone. Some time after that one night, my boyfriend and I woke up to a very weird sound coming from the right side of the wall where, on the other side, there was nothing. It was like a scratching sound that moved under our bed and behind our bed. That was the first time my boyfriend got really scared, even though he did not believe in paranormal stuff. After that, I had a couple of nights without any encounter until my neighbor came to visit us and we had a deep talk. One point, I never told her about this before, she had no idea about any of this happening before. She asked me out of nowhere, "Hey, I have something to ask you, but please don't get spooked or anything." She told me, "Hey, please don't get scared, but there is somebody in your bedroom standing and watching us. It's a tall, dark person, and it's standing on the right side of the bed." I went completely pale, And I told her, yes, that's my side of the bed. After that, we both went silent for some time to process what she had just told me, and from there it started to go a little crazy. Every time she came to our house, she asked me if I could close the door to the bedroom because it's really creepy to see it standing there and watching. Another couple of weeks passed by, and then she asked me again, like, hey, did you do something? I asked her, no, why? Because the thing is standing now on the left side of the bed. I went pale again and told her, yes, we have changed sides, and I seek it now on my left side. And she told me, OMG, the thing may be really attached to you since it's moving everywhere with you. Later she started to see it also in the living room every time when I was in the living room, but I had no idea what its purpose was or what it wanted from me. 3 years have passed, and we moved to Spain, where I currently live, and it seems to have passed on to my sister because one day she called me and told me, hey, do you remember your dark, tall friend? Yes, why? Because he is haunting me now. Do you have any idea what it may have been? I saw a lot of paranormal stuff when I was a child and a teenager, and I still sometimes have weird encounters, but it's not as intense as it was before. I have a video of a bottle lid jumping up and down on its own, with no gas. The bottle does nothing, it just started moving up and down. Thanks in advance for any ideas. 3 glowing lights followed us on the highway. In 2016, my boyfriend and I were traveling back to our city from our friend's house, located an hour away. They were hosting a housewarming, there was really bad energy in that house, that's for another story, and they were having a bonfire, so we ended up staying pretty late. We started our hour-long drive home along the highway between our 2 towns. It was a weekday and late, so we were the only vehicle on the road as far as you could see either way. As we traveled along this rural highway, which is part of the Highway of Tears, a detail I felt was worth mentioning due to its somber significance, we were surrounded only by farmland and bush, feeling completely alone. I waited until I noticed 3 glowing orange lights in the distance. At first, I thought the lights were from another car, but I questioned why it would have 3 headlights. So naturally, I figured it could be motorcycles, not uncommon to see around here. They seemed off, though, then I realized they weren't following the curves of the road and were zipping around sporadically. I eventually mentioned this to my boyfriend. He had also noticed them in his side mirror. I felt pretty uneasy. Then, the 3 lights appeared somewhat orb-like and glowing. The lights were suddenly getting closer and closer behind our truck at a speed that was impossible for any vehicle to achieve. And again, these lights/orbs came straight towards us. If they were a vehicle, they would follow the curves of the highway. These lights would zip up close behind the truck. Never too close, but close enough. Then zip backward away from us. They would rise up fast into the sky and drop back down. I was freaking out about myself. My boyfriend was trying to keep me calm, but I was shaking, and I could tell that he was also very unnerved. And he is not someone to worry about things like glowing lights and orbs, or anything paranormal, at all. What we were seeing was not making any sense, though. It had nothing to do with light reflections or anything. There were basically no lights aside from our dashboard and headlights. The lights were not vivid and solid, nor were they fast and erratic. This pattern continued for pretty much the entire drive. I'm white-knuckling it the entire way. I'm freaking myself out, thinking stuff like, what if we broke down right now? What are these things? Why are they following us? It wasn't until we finally got close enough to civilization again that they backed off and disappeared. We were so relieved that we stopped at the first cafe in the small community outside our city, and my body ached from being tense for so long. I think about those lights often. What on earth were they? Spirits? UFOs? Something else? And why were they following us? Testing us? Playing with us? I wish I knew. Anyway, I hope you liked my experience. If you have any thoughts on what these lights were, I'm open to hearing. Thanks. I am convinced an entity has been following me my entire life. I am 25 years old and had a pretty normal upbringing, nothing abusive, overly traumatic, or out of the ordinary. Even now, I live a pretty boring and standard life. It all started when I was about 4 to 5 years old. Mind you, I don't remember an awful lot of the finer details, but I remember my parents had purchased their first home, a decent 4-bed detached house with a nice garden and genuinely good vibes from what my memory serves me. The next door neighbors and local kids, who would later be my childhood friends, told my older sister, who was around 6 to 7 at the time, and me that there was a big demonic rat living in the attic who ate the girl who previously lived there. Of course, as kids, we were quite frightened by the story, even though it was purely a product of imagination. However, in retrospect, something must have inspired the creation of such a creepy background story. My parents weren't too well off at this point, and the house needed a lot of work. I got the smallest room because I was the youngest child. My youngest sibling was only a newborn at the time and stayed in my parents' room. The activity started the moment my dad went to work. My father worked 1 month at home and 1 month at sea, which made him somewhat absent during my childhood. My dad had to leave to go to work after a few weeks of us moving in. The following evening, my sister woke up crying and telling my mom there was a black man in the house who was threatening her to leave or else. When she said black man, she was referring to a silhouette of a man, almost like a shadow. My mom dismissed it initially. After all, nightmares are quite common and don't necessarily mean anything. However, this continued. My sister continued to have the same dream every single night, each one like a countdown before the black man would take action. On the final night, at around 7 p.m., after my sister got the final warning from the black man the night before, 7 p.m. was our bedtime, it was still bright outside. My sister starts screaming, absolutely losing her shit as the black man walks out of the walk-in wardrobe in her room, stops at the end of the bed, and just stares at her. My mom rushes in, but of course, nothing. However, this was the beginning of hell for us. After this, a few things happened. We would hear talking in the kitchen at nighttime, the breakfast stools being moved about, and the old Windows 2000 family computer turning on in the middle of the night full blast despite it being unplugged religiously every evening by my parents. Pretty minor things, I know, which likely have reasonable explanations. At this point I still didn't experience much personally, but I was aware these things were odd. My sister wouldn't sleep in her room, so we had to sleep in the guest bedroom, as we called it. Unfortunately, things began to escalate further when my dad returned after the month. When my dad left the house, strange occurrences began to happen to my mom, including hearing voices and experiencing faults in the electronics. Then one day, as my dad was about to drive out of the front yard to get a packet of cigarettes, my mom rushed out, screaming for him to come back. The entire attic space began to shake violently like there was an earthquake. Mind you, this is Ireland, so it 100% was not even a mild tremor. But of course, it stopped again the second my dad came back. These things kept up for months. Every night I had extremely gruesome and horrific night terrors, and we could hear footsteps going up and down the stairs all night long. This was so routine my sister and I just didn't even pay attention to that anymore. The worst thing that happened to me had to be when I was in my bedroom. I would only ever go in there during the day because I was too scared of being alone at night over everything. I was reading some stupid Jackie Chan animated series magazine in my room when it got ripped from my hand with force and thrown across the room. I shat myself and ran to the door, which slammed shut and wouldn't budge. I was crying so bad, and it took about a minute or two to finally give way. This all continued for years and became part of our day-to-day lives until things escalated and began to continue even in my father's presence. At this point, it was taken seriously. He had later returned from visiting his family in Asia and came back with something called a tawaz, an amulet that he hung above the front door, and some weird sand he buried outside the perimeter of the house, and everything stopped overnight. It was like a miracle. All was good for a while, but we moved out to the countryside. And whatever was previously at that house took a huge fancy to me. I began seeing a ridiculously tall man dressed in a brown suit in the corner of my eye every time I looked into a mirror. He was well over 6 feet and had quite a scary, yet human, face. I first saw it in my school bathrooms, but it seemed to happen quite a lot in other places, including at our new house. Shit really hit the fan when I was about 12 to 13 and my sister and I went to see her friend play at a local gig for teenagers. I had to go to the bathroom really badly, but my gut was telling me, no, it was screaming at me, not to go. But I eventually caved. I wasn't going to pee my pants because I was being paranoid. I headed to the bathroom when this incredibly tall and slender-looking man pushed me aside and rushed inside. Rude, I thought, and I still had that gut feeling to turn around. When I went into the bathroom, there were no urinals and only 2 stalls. One stall appeared to be occupied, and when I entered it, I found that the lock was broken, preventing me from securing it from the inside. My gut was imploding at this point. Just a quick piss, in and out, I told myself. Just as I finished, I turned around, and the bathroom lights cut out. Holy duck. I began to properly aim the needle, so I rushed towards what I believed was the door. Nope, it was too dark, my eyes weren't adjusted, and I couldn't find the door. I then noticed a faint outline of the tall man who was in the stall beside me. I genuinely thought I was going to be assaulted or harmed at this point. I fell to the ground, crying and pleading not to be hurt, which felt pathetic, but I was just a scared kid. When the lights came back on, he was standing directly in front of me, leaving me alone. He had just disappeared. Needless to say, I got the duck out of there and reported the incident to management after I told my sister about it. They asked around to try and find the man, but nobody else had even seen somebody of that description the entire night. It then clicked with me, it was the guy I had been seeing in mirrors. I swear, even now, over a decade later, I refuse to sleep in a room that has a mirror. Not happening. I never saw that man again after this. Instead, there were a lot of minor but frightening occurrences over the next few years, like doors opening by themselves, noises, and sounds, but nothing visual or demonic. Still, it kept me really on edge and made me feel like I was going crazy. Everyone else in my house began to move on from what had happened in the old house, but I just couldn't. I knew whatever it was took a shining to me. I won't go into every single encounter that happened here on end, but eventually my mom and I would go back to the old house to tidy it up, as we were going to rent it out. We had just finished tidying the living room and had left to go and get stuff from the boot of the car. When we came back, there was this white plastic bag tied with a firm knot in the corner of the room. We were both so weirded out about how it had gotten there. We had cleaned the place spotlessly. My mom opened it up and began to gag. It was full of raw meat and innards of an animal. Honestly, so disgusting. We left shortly afterwards, but my mom reached up and took the amulet from above the door. She said she wanted to open it and check it out. When we got back, she opened it and found it inside. I asked a few friends who spoke various languages if they could identify the text. We discovered that it was in Arabic, but it was extremely hard to read, so we never obtained a proper translation. My mom burned the paper and forgot all about it. 2 of the tenants left the house we used to live in, claiming it was haunted and leaving in absolute terror. One even refused to return and collect their belongings, which was a major pain in the butt. Fast forward to when I was around 18 or 19, we had gotten a new puppy, a golden retriever named Teddy, and a few months later, we adopted a new kitten, as both our old dog and cat had unfortunately passed away close to each other. I continued having the strange occurrences and general paranormal shit I had to live with, but one night I had fallen asleep, and I was woken up by a man with his back turned, sitting at the edge of my bed. I was completely paralyzed, and he spoke to me. He said he was going to hurt my kitten. I began to feel quite scared and told the entity not to touch my kitten, to which it responded with something like, "Fine, I will get your dog instead." He disappeared, and once he did, I was able to move again, so I quickly left my room, feeling terrified. About 2 to 3 days later my mom discovered a cancerous tumor in my dog's upper mouth. He was a year old, and the vet said in 25 years of experience he had never seen a dog so young get this form of cancer/growth. He had to be put to sleep about 10 days later, and a massive part of me ducking hates myself for it. I have never gotten over his death. In fact, I cry every time I think about it, even though it happened over 6 years ago. I feel a significant sense of responsibility for not taking action during that night terror. Nevertheless, the situation escalated to the point where I was unable to sleep at night without experiencing distressing dreams or episodes, prompting me to seek solace in prayer. I would play the Quran at a low volume in my room every night, and as a result, I no longer experienced bad dreams or unsettling experiences. I felt so good for about 1 to 2 years. Then I let my guard down. One night, feeling extremely tired, I decided not to play anything because I thought that phase of my life was over. Boy, was I wrong. Naturally, that same night, someone knocked on my bedroom door, waking me up. This was at around 2 a.m. in the morning. The voice sounded just like my mom. It kept calling my name and telling me to open the door and to come out. My mom would 110% never do this. She would have just walked in and spoke to me if she needed to and would never come up that late at night unless there was a serious emergency. I just stood up, listening to the knocks as this thing impersonating my mom was calling for me to come out. It eventually stopped. I played the prayers and fell asleep hours later. Spoiler alert, I told my mom the next morning that the voice wasn't actually her. Once again, I returned to the practice of going to sleep with prayers playing, which resolved the issue once more. But I had let my guard down one night. My wife, at the time, girlfriend, was going to France to visit a friend. I was alone that night and exhausted. I didn't bother turning on my laptop to play the prayers. I couldn't, I was physically exhausted. That night, around 2 a.m., bang, a huge slam against the bedside table woke me up. I looked over to the corner of my bed, and there was a horrific sight. I can't even explain it. It was the most terrifying thing I had ever seen, like something of pure evil. A very small, middle-aged woman, who was covered in dirt and filth and looked like a corpse, was staring right at me. I thought of sleep paralysis looking back at it, but I could move, and I was fully awake. I backed up against the corner of the opposite side and began saying, "No, no. Duck off, no way, duck off." It eventually vanished. I ducking ran down to my parents' room and woke them up at 1 a.m. I was shaking and in shock. I ended up sleeping on the couch at their house for the next 2 weeks of my stay. I've been back several times since and refused to sleep in the room or even go in there unless necessary. My parents and siblings say ever since I left that room, nobody goes up there, and they sense something disturbing has nested there. When I first moved away to Scotland after I graduated, I was living with this girl, a bit of a pain, but hey, she helped pay the bills where we were renting, so I couldn't complain. Of course, things began to happen at that house, and I knew she was on edge too. Thankfully, I reached out to her, as one day when my girlfriend was over, she could have sworn she saw a shadow lurking in the hallway, and a few days prior, I was playing Crash Bandicoot and saw a shadow creature from the corner of my eye watching me. Needless to say, I confronted my roommate, and she said she also felt things were off at the house. I moved out shortly after that, especially when she was drunk one night and kept telling me there was a man in my room. I felt extremely creeped out by the situation because she was visibly upset about everything. Present day, I have my house and am now married, happy, and a functional adult. However, things still haven't stopped. As I write this, my wife is away down south visiting family, so I've been home alone all week. I finished work on Friday early and had a small power nap, big mistake. I had another terrible nightmare, and when I woke up, I could hear noises coming from the downstairs bedroom. I did a full scan of the house to ensure that nobody had broken in because it sounded like somebody was moving about. These things continue as a daily occurrence, and I constantly feel like there is a very heavy and evil entity just watching me 24/7, waiting for me to either be by myself or to slip up. It's mentally exhausting. I know this won't be the last time these things occur, and I fear having children in case I bring all of this on them too. Has anybody else gone through a similar experience? Did it ever end? Is it ongoing? How do you manage it? I feel so alone sometimes over it. Am I cursed? Or just ducking insane?